Okay, now we'll begin again. Thank you very much. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the August 13th meeting of the study session, Newport Beach City Council. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Before we get into current business, I just want to advise all the members of the public here today that we are going to slightly switch the order of the items. If you have an agenda in front of you, that we're going to move the Marine Avenue tree maintenance item up before the water rate. So just so you know, you won't be confused. But anyway, and as I will probably say many times during this conversation, I'll do that when people start clapping. So let's try to. Oftentimes I say wave your hands and fingers if you want to clap, but not to make the noise. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. All right. We need to clarify any items on the consent calendar. Any questions on the consent calendar? Mr. Avery? Mr. Duffield? Mr. Muldoon? Ms. Brenner? No. Mr. Herdman?
None.
Mayor Pro Tem? Okay. We'll have a presentation of a proclamation right now, and is Ms. Hoskinson and Michael Hoskinson here. If you'd please come forward and come to this front podium. Please come forward all the way down. Well, we're here to recognize the owners of the Spaghetti Bender restaurant celebrating its 50th anniversary in the city of Newport Beach. Did you not know? No. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Oh, well, thanks to your council member, Mr. Avery. He has brought it to our attention, and so I'd like to read a proclamation in your honor. Okay. Whereas Joyce Hoskinson, a recently divorced single mom, was running Joyce's Pantry on Main Street in Huntington Beach, and while taking her mother and son for a drive down PCH one sunny day, she spied a rental sign at a restaurant and saw a great opportunity. And the Spaghetti Bender, named after her father, Papa Lorenzo's nickname, was born. And at the time Papa Lorenzo was cooking on a cruise ship, Joyce called, and he came running to create the famous creamy Italian dressing and minestrone soup that have become a destination treat for so many. Mama and Papa cooked by day, with Joyce waitressing at night, all the while running the Huntington Beach restaurant 6 days a week. And Joyce completely remodeled, and eventually word got out, and a local food critic wrote a glowing review which caused business to boom. So Joyce decided that Newport Beach was the better bet and closed Joyce's Pantry, after which became the Sugar Shack. And Joyce completely remodeled the restaurant in 1976 into the familiar Italian house it is today. And whereas in the last 50 years, Newport Beach locals and visitors alike have graciously made the Spaghetti Bender their home, and the Bender has been like family for countless employees. Chef Alfonso has been behind the stove for over 30 years, with many other employees spending a decade or more serving guests. So now, therefore, I, Diane Brooks Dixon, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby congratulate the Spaghetti Bender and Joyce Hoskinson, her family and employees, for half a century of great food and service for Newport Beach residents and visitors. Congratulations. Now, I know you're not prepared, but you're welcome to make any comment if you'd like, or your son, I assume that.
Give it to Michael. Well,
we just want to thank all of you. Thank you, Councilman Avery, so much for this blessing for my mom, who what do you say? We're 1/100th of 1% of people that last this long in this business. It's a major accomplishment, and we always thank the city of Newport Beach for being so supportive of us. And boy, what a great honor, and what a fabulous achievement for my mom. Yeah, thank you.
And what a
very
great
much.
surprise. We're proud, happy to be part of it.
Let me just say
Sure,
this.
yes.
I need to thank our staff. Honestly, we couldn't have been more fortunate than to have Chef Alfonso. Janie Barger, who is here, was my mainstay for 35 years. And also the people of Newport Beach who have loved us, and we love them. And it's such a family affair. And I'm just so blown away today. I had no idea.
Why you were being called up there? That's funny.
So I so appreciate you all and
right.
the city.
We're
Thank
going
you.
to, if you would join me over here at the flag, we're going to present the proclamation and take some photographs.
Diane, could I say something? I'd like to say something. One of my fondest memories is from 47 years ago when we started going there, bringing my Italian mother-in-law and listening to her conversation with your dad. They would just jabber away, and it was so sweet and so dear, and we've appreciated you all these years, and we thank you for your service to our community.
Mr. Avery, do you want to join me?
Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Well, that was fun. All right, now we will dive into the Marine Avenue tree maintenance, and city staff will be discussing the current and past tree maintenance practices with regard to the city staff trees along Marine Avenue on Balboa Island, and the discussion will also review the current health and status of the trees, including a review of recent arborist evaluation reports. So just for members of the public, the staff will be presenting, then the council will be commenting, and when we come to open our public comment, I might as well ask the question now. How many are here and intend to speak on this item when we get to public comments? If there are more than 20, I intend to limit the public comments to 2 minutes from 3 minutes, just to allow everyone to have an opportunity to speak. So we'll gauge it with the number of people. So be prepared to, if you might be thinking of your comments, to condense them down to 2 minutes. All right.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I need to recuse myself
Oh, all right.
out of an abundance of caution.
We are going to miss you through the next period of time. Okay. Mr. Webb, would you like to begin, please?
Yes, I would. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and folks in the audience. Thank you very much for taking the time today to talk about this tree subject, which is near and dear to our hearts. I was going to take a minute before we start because, as you recall, the council asked us back in March to come back and talk about the maintenance and the trimming cycle and the status of the trees on Marine Avenue. But I think it's important because we have the folks of the audience here that may have seen various snapshots, and I know there's been a lot of information out there, some of it not necessarily correct. I want to take a minute to kind of set the table about another project which is related to this. So this has to do with the Marine Avenue Rehabilitation Project, and some history on this is back in about 2015. The island folks were getting together, members of various associations, that started talking about maybe doing a potential rehabilitation project on Marine Avenue. Back then, former council member Ed Selich actually worked with the staff and put money in the capital improvement budget in 2016-17. We put $250,000 to start working on concept plans and possibly a project. From there, the island set up a committee, Marine Avenue Committee, and that was a pretty wide committee, I understand. I never sat on that, but I heard there was quite a few people on that. We had several people from the islands. The associations were on that. I think we had a couple former elected officials, 2 council members. I think even the chamber was involved in that, but if we have more details on that, I'm going to have to talk to the folks who run that committee. From there, the city staff attended those meetings, and we also arranged for a design consultant to help provide assistance to the committee in developing these, because I've heard things about the city's done RFPs, we've worked on a project, and we have. We've got a concept that was started on that program with the design consultant. Early on in this, too, the city staff advised the folks in Marine Avenue in this committee that the trees would probably be an issue in any kind of redevelopment project. Then landscape manager Dan Serena was involved in this, and along with Kevin Picard next to me. They have a long history with these trees and have been working with them for years and doing their best to maintain and keep these trees viable. But they do know there's concerns with the trees, and particularly if you're going to do a project, you're probably going to have root damage and other things. So that was brought to the attention of the folks as they started working on the concept. As they went further into that, again, the objective was this to develop a concept plan and then go island-wide with this and gain a consensus of some sort of what the project might look like on this conceptual design. I'm sorry, did I skip ahead one? There you go. Yep.
Mr. Muldoon has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Who was on this committee?
Actually, I'm going to probably ask John Noyes to come up if you like. He actually was chair of the committee. He's the chair of the Merchants Association and ran the committee. I never went to the meeting. Mark Vukovic at the time was attending on our behalf, and I think he could list all the folks who is on that committee. But as a background, I was just kind of lining that up so we know what why we're talking today about maintenance.
Mr. Noy is going to come forward. I want to answer that question.
Is Mr. Noyes here? Would you mind coming up? Mr. Muldoon would like to see if you could talk to who was on your committee.
Good afternoon. I'm John Noyes. I'm the president of the BIMI, which is Balboa Island Marketing Incorporated. And I can tell you who's on the committee. The names are somewhere in the package that I gave you.
Okay.
And do you want to know the names, or do you want me to give you the composition of the committee?
Composition's fine.
Mostly, we have citizens who played leadership roles in our community. We have business owners, city staff. We have Newport Beach and Company as part of our process. We had 3 ex-mayors, and I was the moderator of that committee.
When did it form?
Pardon me? We formed the committee in January of 17, and it's a subcommittee of our business association, which is a 501c corporation.
Okay. And was there official council action to create this committee, or was it just informally created?
Informally created.
By our staff in conjunction? Was our staff leading it,
It's
or
the staff,
did you lead it? Was our staff spearheading it, or would you say you were spearheading it?
Yeah.
Staff was not
No,
leading
I
the
think
committee. This was
staff
formed by
came
the
to us
island.
first. Did the staff come and ask us to form the committee? And the way we formed it was with leadership on the island. We took people that were presidents of the Improvement Association, of myself, people from Little Island Association, and we came up with a list of people that we knew that were long-standing supporters of our community, long-standing volunteers, and that's how we formed the committee.
Okay, thank you.
So as I understand, the committee had multiple meetings open to the public as they developed and worked towards this concept, and I understand they had 2 open houses on the island also to get the island folks and other folks involved in the concept development. As that was taking place, a little later on, around January 2019, we received an independent mailer that was distributed to the residents requesting basically a vote on Marine Avenue in regard to would we want that to be quaint and historical or classic contemporary style. From there, a little while later after that, from the survey that arose, we met an organization that had just formed. It was the Balboa Island Preservation Association, as they introduced it to us. And they were advocating to keep the island in a historical, quaint mode, I guess based on their survey results from that. A little later on from that, in March of 2019, the committee and staff was advised that there's an independent arborist review of the trees on Marine Avenue, and that a report was prepared by the Balboa Island Preservation Association again. So that was brought to our attention. And then further on down that line, as we started doing our annual maintenance, we had some discussions with the Balboa Island Preservation Association and their arborist, who was Mr. Applegate, getting some critique and criticism on the way the city was trimming its trees at the time, because we do an annual inspection and a light trim just to keep them in a safe mode. Our contractor, Great Scott, did that trimming on March 11th and 12th. So as we move further down the road, at this point, as I know, there's been no further discussion on the project itself taking place as we've been working through this tree concern. There are some confusing things, though, and I point that out, and I want to make clear to the folks out there. There are two things here. There is a potential project being discussed that could affect the existing trees. That conversation is not concluded nor finalized. It hasn't even come to council. It's been on the island, and they are talking about what they should do on a potential project. There's another item that we're talking about tonight, and that's the maintenance of the trees. The city has maintained these trees for as long as they've existed, and we continue to maintain these trees because they're a responsibility of the city. And I point this out just and I put this in bold here, contrary, because I've heard several things. Folks have called me. I've heard statements and things put out there. The city is not intentionally over-maintaining or removing the existing eucalyptus trees on Marine Avenue in any way to make room for the project. We're not connected to the project. We have to maintain the trees, and they stand alone. If the project goes forward, there might be impacts to the trees or there might not. But tonight we're going to talk about the maintenance of those trees, how we have done them in the past, what their status is now, and moving forward. And I can point that out, too. I put this on you for your information. The council had a study session back in February of 2019 where we did a complete overview of the city's tree programs. And you can view that and you'll see what we do on our maintenance. I think you'll find out of there the city really cares for trees, maintains it. It does its best to keep its inventory of trees. We have over 35,000 trees out there. And you can read all about that if you go back to that council item. So tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Director Micah Martin and our city arborist and landscape manager Kevin Picard to talk about the maintenance of the trees.
Okay, Mr. Molden has another question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Just before we switch gears here, who ordered the conceptual design?
Pardon?
Who ordered the conceptual design that was online that...
So the conceptual design, as I mentioned, the committee formed and they asked staff to be part of that. Mr. Selich put money in the budget that was approved by council, and that money was used to hire a consultant and to assist the committee. So we added to, I think they spent about $20,000 in developing some designs and drawings for now the committee and the island to work around and come up with a concept.
Okay, thank you.
All right, please proceed. Thank you.
I'll turn over to you, Kevin.
Mayor Dixon, Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill, council members, my name is Kevin Picard. I'm the Parks and Trees Superintendent and Acting City Arborist. Little background on Marine Avenue trees. The trees first appeared in the 1920s on the 200 block of Marine Avenue. The eucalyptus species predominantly was the flooded glum, or the Eucalyptus rudis. Today, there's 42 trees on Marine Avenue composed of 5 different types of eucalyptus. The lemon-scented gum is the predominant species. It should be noted that these are not the same trees here that we had that are there. There's not any 100-year trees there. They're not the same trees that were back there in the 1920s. Little background on Marine Avenue trees. The eucalyptus trees on Marine Avenue were adopted as special neighborhood trees in November 28, 1988. The trees appear to have been topped prior to the city's adoption of the International Society of Arboriculture Standards up through the 1980s. And so we're not trying to hide away from past practices before there was adopted standards. Those standards were adopted in the 1980s. Before kind of the science of arboriculture developed. Prior to 1993, city crews did not have the capacity to trim over 55 feet, so a lot of the trees were topped at 55 feet. In 1994, our first tree maintenance contractor, West Coast Arborist, was brought on and was attempted to do corrective structural pruning. The city classifies in the G1 policy the different public trees into 3 categories. Basically, there's special trees, which are further categorized into the landmark, dedicated, and neighborhood trees. These are the eucalyptus trees on Marine Avenue are neighborhood trees. And then there's problem trees, and then all other trees are defined as standard trees. It is the city's policy to retain city trees categorized as special trees, or again, in this case, neighborhood trees, that by their unusual size, number, species, location, lend a special character to the residential, commercial, or business area. Special trees shall be retained unless there are overriding problems such as death, disease, or the creation of a hazardous situation which require the removal. So you'll see that some of the trees on Marine Avenue fall into at least two of those categorizations as death. There's a dead tree out there, and then the creation of a hazardous situation. In the G1 policy, prior to the consideration of the removal of a special tree, staff shall prepare a report identifying and implementing specific treatment to retain the trees. If specific treatment is unsuccessful or unpractical in retaining the tree, then staff shall report shall be made to the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission. So what have we done to try to help these trees, kind of put them to retain them? Our past treatments have been minor root pruning and shaving to accommodate hardscape repairs. Deferred hardscape maintenance, basically we're allowing some minor cracks or imperfections to the hardscape to persist. Ramping with asphalt patches, repeated grinding of lifting sidewalks, removal and resetting of hardscape, curbs, sidewalks, and pavements. We do annual inspections on these trees. We do annual trimming, for example, light trimming, for example, like removing dead limbs, crossing branches, hitting the ends of the trees. Reviews by consulting arborists. We've had at least 2 reviews by our consulting arborist, Walt Warner, who's here tonight. Treatments of diseases and insects. In the past, we've treated the trees for lerp psyllid and tortoise beetle, and supplemental irrigation and nutrition using like a water truck. It should be noted that the disease treatment, the lerp psyllid, what we did in the past is we injected the tree's trunk with an insecticide because there's not much space to put, we didn't want to do a foliar spray of the tree because, there would be drift concern. So it was noted on, I think, both reports that there are indications of those holes where we put the insecticide into the tree. So site conditions. In arborist language, there's a very common term that's called right tree for the right place. So I think many arborists would argue that the eucalyptus from the very inception of them being placed there in the 1920s wasn't the right tree for the right place. A lot of people might, people didn't know that back then in the 1920s based on our science today. So the site conditions are very crowded pedestrian sidewalks, street parking underneath the trees on Marine Avenue is very busy business tourist area. Small tree wells surrounded by concrete in various states. It restricts the air and the water and the nutrients that can go to that root surface and get into the root structures. There's no supplemental irrigation. The only irrigation that the trees get are from the occasional water trucking that we do, or maybe the power washing that is conducted on the sidewalks. So during the drought time that we had in the 2013, 2014, the trees really suffered both from lack of irrigation and water, but also from the smog and ozone that happens during the drought. Shallow available root growth area due to the high saltwater table. There's been, during that project, there was some studies done. It's known that there's a very shallow, high saltwater table out there on Marine Avenue. And then there's been years of root crowns covered by decomposed groundnut. And then more recently, the artificial turf that was installed by the Balboa Island Improvement Association, which has consequently been removed. And then finally, there's canopies in close proximity to buildings, roofs, signage. We constantly get business owners wanting more trimming because there's leaks in rain gutters, and there's a big mess in their businesses, and the leaves get into their businesses. And so we really have to withstand that pressure to not trim them so hard to keep the health of those trees up. Maintenance history. So for the past 25 years, the city has inspected and trimmed all the Marine Avenue trees annually. This occurs over multiple days in the early morning so as to minimize disruption to businesses. As Mr. Webb mentioned, our last service was on March 11th and March 12th of 2019. I want to note, too, is that we notify businesses over a week in advance to this trimming. So the businesses and also some of the residents that live on Marine Avenue are notified well in advance of the work. Over the past 25 years, also, the city has removed and replaced probably approximately 30% of the eucalyptus trees. It's maybe a number of 20 to 25 trees. Like I said previously, none of the existing trees out there are original trees. In May 2017, based on risk assessments reviewed, and this went to the PB&R, they approved the removal of 2 special eucalyptus trees at 318 and 3226 Marine Avenue. The city responds annually to large limb breakages, typical during storm events, the Santa Ana winds. There's also a phenomenon called summer branch drop that occurs with eucalyptus trees. Prior replacements were composed of lemon-scented gums, water gum trees, and more recently the African tulip and the ginkgo trees. Those were, the African tulip and the ginkgo trees were decided to be placed there as to, during the talk about that project that was discussed. Considering the location, a lot of these older trees are reaching the end of their typical lifespan, which we mark as like a 50 to 60 years.
Kevin, I'm just going to interrupt for just a second. It was an important point there, too, how we trim our trees, because some of the urban myths I've been hearing about the city sneaking in at night and trying to do this, we purposely trim Marine Avenue early in the morning over multiple days just because there's so much tourist and parking traffic. We can get in there at 5 or 6 and we're done by 9, and we have to come back several times. We only have a small working window, so I need to make sure the audience understands that's why we're trimming early in the morning. It's particularly difficult to get in there, as you know, during the day, lots of walking, lots of cars.
One thing that
Hold on, I'm going to jump in really quick, too, just to also reiterate. The African tulip tree and ginkgo trees, there's only one of each of those variety out there. And we planted those just to try them out, to see how they would do, how people liked them. It was never our intent to replace all the trees with those type of trees. It was just a trial basis to try those different varieties out. So there's only one of each of those varieties there, just as a trial basis.
Do those trees, what is the average height do those trees reach?
The African tulip will get to about 40 feet tall. The ginkgo much taller, but more columnar, maybe like 60 feet on the ginkgo.
And then you mentioned that was it the business improvement, or the community committee specifically requested that the empty tree wells be replaced with these 2 trees? Did I hear that correctly? Or who decided on those trees?
And I was going to say, I remember talking to our former landscape manager, Dan Serino. This was years ago those trees were put in. It wasn't necessarily because there's empty. There were removals. There have been removals, as Kevin's pointed out, over the years. We've taken out several trees, and that was an option to put a couple in and try those. There are 5 empty tree wells still out there today that we're going to talk about. Those empty tree wells are done because there was a death or dying tree taken out for maintenance purposes. We purposely didn't put one back in yet because we also knew there was a project discussion, so we wanted to see where that was going to go. But they weren't removed for the project. They were removed because they died, and then we just kept the tree well open.
So just to kind of sum up where Kevin's been presenting the history, so over this period of time, from the 1920s, so 100 years, the eucalyptus has been replaced consistently until recently when the ginkgo and the tulip tree were installed.
Yeah, the eucalyptus has been the consistent replacement up until recently.
And then going back to an earlier comment, what was that original tree species In 1920, were they all
The flooded gum, or
Okay.
the Eucalyptus rudis?
So they were eucalyptus?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Please proceed.
One thing I'd like to mention on the pictures, that the top picture on this is the removal that was approved by PB&R at, I believe that's 326 Marine. And then the bottom picture is the pruning that we conducted most recently.
Mr. Muldoon.
Kevin, you got a great first name, but what is your last name?
Ikar.
Bikar?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Bikar, the top tree you said is removed by PB&R, which stands for,
Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission.
and why was their approval required?
Because it was deemed hazardous. They were deemed hazardous.
So normal procedure is to have PB&R approve tree removals.
Correct. On a special tree, the PB&R would require approval of the removal.
Oh, thank you.
Would you just explain, Mr. Webb, that it's in council policy, the role that PB&R plays, the special role that they play for special trees?
PB&R has been given oversight by council of our trees, and most of the policies relate to going to them. So the G policy requires on a special tree that if there's a removal for the various reasons, it needs to go back to them. One of the examples we'll mention, we were just there in August because there's a dead tree on Marine Avenue, and we took that to them, and they concurred that needs to come out. So it's in the council policy.
What does PB&R do when you recommend? Do they do a site visit and determine, or what's an educated guess, or how do they make that determination?
So we submit to them a staff report that gives the detailed information on the status of the tree, the need for the removal, or the reason why we're requesting the removal. And then we give them, any other additional information they may request. And then we give our recommendation as to how we should move forward. But ultimately, their vote decides how we decide to move forward with that removal.
To your recollection, has PB&R ever denied the request to remove a tree?
Typically, when staff suggests the removal of a tree because of, disease, dead, dying, I have not seen, and I'm sure Kevin could attest, they typically support that decision. At that point, it's based off liability and risk as to why we're making that decision, and they typically support that.
Okay. Ms. Brenner.
I can specifically speak to in the late 1980s when I was chair of the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission, and we made recommendations to the council. Oftentimes, we made recommendations to take trees out because we thought that they were hazardous, specifically on poppy in Corona Del Mar, because they were ramped and we felt like they were dangerous with no streetlights in town. But the council, bowing to public pressure, chose not to take the trees out. So the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission sometimes can make recommendations without as much concern about politics as the council does when something gets here. And so what happened was those trees were saved, and subsequently we ended up having to take all the eucalyptus trees out just a few months ago and replace them with other trees and redo all the sidewalks and all the streets. But that's something that the PB&R Commission takes seriously and often will make site visits to see the trees, not maybe on buses together, but they will go out and visit the trees that are being considered.
Okay, so it's a thoughtful process, a deliberative process. All right, please proceed. Thank you.
So this is an example of our the recent fallen limbs, October 2018. These are happened in the last year's Santa Ana wind events. But we have fallen limbs annually out there during each winter and Santa Ana wind events. I think in the bad storms of 2017, we had limbs go down on Marine Avenue as well.
And I just go back to that slide, Kevin. I just want to put emphasis on this. This right here is why we go out and visit these trees every year. This is why we go out and do an annual maintenance on these trees, to try to prevent these situations from these limbs dropping and breaking. This is always our concern. At the forefront of our concern is the risk that's associated with, tree failures and limb failures. So last thing we want is, somebody to get injured or property damage. So that's why we're really proactive in inspecting our trees on an annual basis and doing the annual maintenance on them the best that we can to try to mitigate these factors.
And even one more thing to add, you'll notice in these pictures there's cars parked in the street. There was people walking around on the street. You know, people weren't hiding at their homes during these bad Santa Ana winds, so it very easily could have been a worse situation. Eucalyptus in others, our eucalyptus are not dissimilar to other cities, local cities here in Southern California. This is in Laguna Beach on Broadway Street. Again, a high pedestrian parking and vehicle traffic area. They take a very similar conservative trimming approach. And when I mean conservative, I mean a thorough trimming. This is another, some more pictures in Laguna Beach on Broadway Street.
If I could interject real quick, Kevin, I actually saw these as I drove around looking and thinking about our trees and had our arborists look at this. I want you to note the look of the trees because you're going to find they're very similar to what we do. And it's because these trees are in a similar location, a lot of pedestrians underneath, cars parked right under them. So when you're in those situations, other cities kind of supporting staff, because I've heard things from the audience that we are aggressively trying to trim our trees into non-existence. No, this is reality. These other people realize these trees are trees that tend to drop limbs and they need to be watched carefully and trimmed a little tighter. So.
And then this is another city. This is in Mission Viejo. This is on Elisa Parkway, very narrow, high-traveled median. Again, the trees look very similar to our trees. And then now I'll get into the consulting arborist reports. There's been 2 reports done. First, the Arborgate consulting report. The author was Greg Applegate. He's a consulting arborist. This was requested by Jody Boyle and the Balboa Island Preservation Association. This report was designated as a tree protection report. I want to emphasize that it wasn't a tree risk analysis. It was kind of a best management practice for the trees, if you will. Summary comments on the current and future tree maintenance. So again, you know, it talked about a lot of the, you know, the city's past mistakes in trimming, and maybe some recommendations as far as how we should be trimming them. He was concerned about some lion's tailing, structural pruning, and other pruning concerns. I do want to note that some of the lion's tailing that was suspected is sometimes that the eucalyptus tree does have a sparse, it's endemic in the species. It's a very sparse tree, so a lot of the growth is on the tips of the trees. So some of the lion's tailing, there might be warranted as a complaint, but a lot of the lion's tailing out there was, I think, more of endemic with the species, not bad trimming. Also, the report was concerned about artificial turf and buried root crowns. We're in agreement with that. Recommendations on protection of trees during construction and repairs. And he suggested no root pruning from 3 to 5 times the diameter of the tree. And I'm in complete agreement with that. It also kind of highlights what was said during those project discussions is you can't have a project without the trees removal because a lot of the work on the hardscapes and the utilities was going to require root pruning that was a lot closer than 3 to 5 times the diameter of the tree. Also, even to repair the existing sidewalks without the project would require root pruning. So what we would need to do if we were to retain even the trees that we're suggesting to be retained is asphalt patching, concrete patching, asphalt ramps, stuff like that. And then he also included a tree health and condition matrix. This is not a tree risk appraisal. The recommendations included 3 eucalyptus tree removals. So while he was recommending 3, there are, their consultant is still recommending some tree removals. And then finally, he recommended a hazard analysis, again, by a tree risk professional versed in risk analysis. This was not saying that these are high-risk trees. There was no mention of that in these reports. Either low risk, high risk, moderate risk, no mention. So now I'll get into our consulting arborist report, Walt Warner Consulting Report. The author...
Just one moment, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Kevin, I want to make sure I'm understanding this. So this report went to the maintenance, not the risk. And when the trees were being trimmed in March this year, wasn't it over a 3 or 4 day period they were trimmed?
We were able to trim them over 2 days.
Okay, 2 days. Was Mr. Applegate there on either of the days?
That's correct.
He was?
Yes, both days.
And was he able to talk with the city crew, or I guess I know we have an outside company doing it, but did he interact with our outside company?
No, he interacted with me and the crew chief.
And what did he say?
He was concerned about some of the cuts that we were making. I think that, I think it was dark, but I think that we were trying. I think that we were pruning appropriately. I think that we got agreement from him.
And did he follow up with any further comments after the tree trimming, saying, "Hey, look, on a future basis, do this instead"?
No.
All right.
Please proceed.
So Walt Warner, consulting arborist. He was contracted by the city of Newport Beach. He conducted a tree risk assessment and provided recommendations. So the risk assessment procedure, when you're conducting a tree risk assessment, it's a scientific-based, quantitative approach. So, and if there are assumptions made in a tree risk assessment, it's made by experienced professionals and with years of experience in arboriculture. So whenever you do a risk assessment, there's a time frame applied. Mr. Warner's time frame was 3 years. There's site factors that are assessed. So it's important to realize that, again, tree stability is separate from tree health. You could have a perfectly healthy tree, but that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Also, there's crown considerations. You look at the crown, you look at the roots, you look at potential targets or objects that the different parts of the tree could strike. And then you do a risk categorization. So once you're doing the risk assessment, you basically come up with a likelihood of failure of a specific tree part, whether it's the scaffolding limb, a dead branch in the tree, or the whole tree. And then you compare that with the likelihood of that specific tree part hitting that object, whether it be a parked car, a building, a pedestrian. And then you take those, the result of that analysis between those two matrices is compared with the consequences of failure. So most of the consequences, as you may suspect, if in fact is going to happen on Marine Avenue, were rated as severe. The overall risk rating in his report deemed high for 27 trees and moderate for 10 trees. And then there was trees that were rated low, too. Our consulting recommends removal of all 27 trees with a high risk rating, and then a reassessment in 1 year of all the trees with a moderate risk.
Excuse me, Mr. Muldoon has a question.
Thank you. So would you break this down? I'm a little confused. I thought it's 27 total, or it's 10 now, 27 next year.
So this is what our consultant recommends.
And could you just break it down again?
27 high-risk trees and 10 moderate trees. He recommends removal of all 27 high-risk trees.
So 27, or the removal of 27 trees out of 42 total, correct?
That's correct.
So we're going to we're going to get rid of 64 of our iconic 64% of our iconic trees in the next, how long? Year?
Yes, in the next year, 27 trees.
Thank you.
Mr. Webb, do you want to clarify that? Is that
Actually, and Kevin's about to get to that, because Kevin also did an assessment in addition to Mr. Warner, and he has a little different recommendation. We recognize that our arborist says there's 27 trees that need to be addressed now. Kevin, being a professional arborist himself, if you would get to that point where you could say your recommendation on that.
Yeah. So this is an example of a tree risk assessment form. And then, so I looked at our consulting arborist review of the 27 high-risk trees. And I recommended, based on a triage system and an urban forestry management principle, the removal of 10 of the high-risk trees this year. And then I identified, it's based on the significant defects in the canopy and the root system and the trunk. So I was looking at the 10 worst trees of the 27 high-risk trees, the trees that I feel that would fall completely over, not like a scaffolding branch dropping, but more like a whole tree failure, are what I categorized as the 10 highest risk trees of the high-risk trees.
okay? I have a question. As we go forward, would the outside consultant recommends 27 as severe, meaning high risk, and you're recommending 10? Are we exposing the city to potential liability because we know that there are 27 severe at-risk trees that could cause potential damage, but we are only removing 10 of those? Maybe that's a city attorney type question.
Well, I think that anytime you have a report that says there's a risk of failure, that if something does happen, then that would be used against the city.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question, just to this form that you have, for the benefit of the community, if it appears that this is a process, an analytical process, that professional tree consultants or managers follow. Could you just explain this assessment form just generally?
So you rate the different parts of the tree. So if you have a tree with dead limbs, codominant limbs, structural problems in the canopy, that might be one tree part that you're factoring. Then what's then you rate that the targets that part could hit, and then you say what's the likelihood of that tree part hitting that target, and you might say it's likely or somewhat likely, and then you compare that part with the consequences of what could happen if that part hit the target.
Okay. Did you have a question, Mr. Moblin? Mr. Avery?
So obviously different arborists will come up with different, based on just how they work. You came up with sort of a different view of it than our hired arborist, right?
No, so when you're looking at a tree risk assessment, you're looking at so if the scaffolding branch or the dead limb is a high risk, is what you're analyzing, that high risk, what you're rating as high risk, the whole tree is high risk. So it's just the one part can categorize the tree as high risk. And I agree with our consulting arborist. I believe that there's 27 high-risk trees out there, but I was looking at the 10 trees that would have a whole tree failure as opposed to maybe a dead branch falling.
So you're making a sort of a judgment on the potential injury or damage.
Yeah, I mean, this is my professional recommendation.
Right. Okay.
Kevin, just for clarity, I think we might have lost some folks. The difference between the Applegate report, which is a tree protection report, is more of a visual review, because what you're showing here and what Applegate actually recommended us to do, this assessment, is a much more detailed, much more look at the structure and concern of the tree, and takes in, as you said, beyond health, it takes in stability and other counts. And that's why you're seeing there is some difference of opinion. Applegate said, well, maybe 3 trees. This gentleman's now saying there's 27 you need to be concerned with. our professional arborists went out and said, well, we should do 10 of them right now. And if you go to your next slide where you're recommending 10
All right,
now.
hold on one second. Mr. Muldoon, you have a question?
The accompanying report that was provided by an outside individual, who provided that?
Applegate, the Applegate report,
No, the one that we requested.
Walt Warner.
And who is Walt Warner?
Walt Warner is our consulting arborist.
And who was his prior employer?
Mr. Warner's in the audience if you'd like to take some questions.
You don't know who his prior employer was, Mr. Webb?
He was the city arborist forester for the city of Santa Monica.
And was he with Great Scott?
No,
He what?
He's never worked for Great Scott?
no, not to my knowledge.
And who is Great Scott?
Great Scott's our tree maintenance contractor.
And what does Great Scott charge per tree removed?
It's based on the DBH of the tree, the diameter of the tree. It's about $30 per inch.
Do you have an estimate what an average tree would cost to remove?
If we have a 30-inch tree out there, then it's maybe $900 per tree.
And we recently approved a change order for Great Scott, correct?
The contract, yes, we did.
What was the increase amount?
I think 200,000.
That sounds right, 200,000? Okay.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to go a different direction, but I'm not sure where that, I mean, that amendment had to do with the trees falling all over the city, not even, I don't think it had anything to do with Balboa Island, so, I mean.
It was because we wanted to increase service and frequency of trimming.
Right, okay. I mean, look, everyone's here wondering what you're going to be recommending and asking us to do. And this is a study session, so we're not making any votes up at the dais today. So, I mean, let me cut to the chase. This is still going to go through the Parks, Beach, and Rec Commission, right? So the conversation about whether we're going to be voting to remove any trees, there's no vote today at the council. We're at a study session. This is going through a Parks, Beach, and Rec Committee, which is meeting, by the way, September 3rd at 6 p.m. If you'd like to go to that, I just letting you know right now, that's where 9 of the trees are going to be discussed. So, I mean, the purpose of this originally, this whole meeting originally was to talk about the tree trimming practices, and it's clearly morphed into something much bigger. But then when I asked for, I think I had asked for this study session. I had asked for it because we had a lot of concerns and discussion about the discussions in March, and you know, I appreciated our inclusion of Mr. Applegate at that time, and I was going to make a comment about that. So, to the extent that folks are wondering whether we're making a decision today, we're not. I think that there's been some confusion on that, so I'm going to clarify that. The decision on whether 9 of the 10 are going to be removed is going to be made by the Parks, Beach, and Rec Commission on September 3rd at 6 p.m. So, is that? I just want to make sure everything I just said is correct.
That's correct. That's where, in fact, some of the things I've heard from the public, I've heard that we're going to remove trees next week. We're going to remove them right away, and we said no. And actually, in the report, and I talked to the press just recently, it has to go to the Park Tree and Rec Commission. They have to review the 10 trees that actually 1 is dead, 9 now, that we're going to be looking to remove.
Okay, because I mean, we received a demand letter today. I'm sorry, this is not public
I
comment.
just wanted to say that the community would like to have due time.
I'm sorry, we can't. Just hold your thought there. Okay, we'll have public comments momentarily. Thank you.
So I guess, I don't know. I've seen pictures of a treeless Marine Avenue, and I'm at a loss for why that would. I mean, that's not before us. It's not before Parks. I mean, have you made any? Are you planning on making any recommendations that every tree on Marine Avenue will be either removed or cut down to the size of, you know, a sapling? I'm trying to understand right now what the recommendations are, so that everyone gathered here is on the same page as we are, because I'm at a loss for this.
And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And that's kind of why I went to the earlier discussion, because there's a confusion with the folks about a project and what we're talking about tonight, maintenance. And that picture that I've seen, has to do with the concept that the committee was working towards without the conclusion of that committee making a resolution. And there's an assumption that all the trees are going to come out. That discussion is part of a project discussion that has to continue. Again, there's a high probability the trees might be affected if we completely remove the roadway. But again, we haven't got to there yet. Tonight we're just talking about the maintenance and we're dealing with the current trees.
Okay, and so a lot of people obviously would like to know what the timeline is also of the project, since that's one of the things that's been discussed. And I mean, to my knowledge, that hasn't been addressed at all to City Council. There's no timeline for even bringing any of the concepts to City Council. There's not been any discussion with Parks, Beach, and Rec, nor has there been any discussion with any other board, commission, or committee on the timeline of this. I mean, this is potentially and likely years down the road in terms of where we are in terms of trying to bring a discussion like this. So there is going to be years probably of public input on what we're even looking at in terms of a design or concept.
You're probably correct, at least 3 to 5 years, I would guess. Once they get to a concept, that concept then goes through PB&R. It has to be approved by council. If it's a complete removal, there's all kinds of things involved. It's only budgeted now to just develop the concept, and that is basically going nowhere right now, as I understand, until we resolve this.
And then in terms of even moving forward from that, when a concept doesn't even go into a design until the council actually approves a contract for an architect to do design, and that's not before us either, is it?
That's correct.
And it hasn't, and it likely won't be for years, if I'm hearing correctly. Fair?
Until we get a design to bring to you, a concept, it won't be going forward.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. Staff has articulated in no uncertain terms they have the ability to cut down these trees without anyone being able to stop them. And I'm trying to stop them, Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill. And this study session allows you, the residents, to say, we don't trust the city staff. And your gut is right on this. Do not trust staff on this issue. Staff is misleading you. The conceptual design that was put up obscurely without any vote from us on the specific design, then taken off the website, meetings behind closed doors. What's going on, if we're going to cut down the trees, that's fine, but it has not been transparent. This is an opportunity for us to be transparent, and we can do 2 things. We can do a straw vote to tell staff, put a moratorium on cutting down these trees, or we can just tell staff, which we often do at the end of a study session, hey, thanks for your input. I heard all the facts. I want to greatly slow this down, and I want us to vote before any action is taken. That's what we should do here today, and you, the people of Newport Beach, have the right to that.
Please, didn't I ask everybody just do like this, please? Thank you. No clapping. That's right. Thank you, Dennis. Ms. Brenner.
I have disagreed with Kevin before on Museum House and other things, and I have never disagreed with him more than I do right now. I have a history of 30 years of service in this city, protecting trees. I have worked with this staff. What I see happening is what's happening in our country, where there is an eagerness to condemn and vilify and not work together and not understand that people make mistakes, that there generally is not a conspiracy. There often are mistakes made along the way where things have maybe not been conveyed properly to the public. What I see happening in this regard was that the trees got mixed up with the infrastructure project. The trees were not the focus of this. You started out talking about the street and the sidewalks are going to have to be replaced on Marine Avenue. You reached out to the community and you worked with the members who showed up. They can only work with the people that show up at those meetings. They worked with the people that showed up. In the process, some landscape architect or whatever kind of architect put up a plan that showed palm trees and the eucalyptus trees disappearing. Pictures like that show up all the time where some architect is being creative. That doesn't mean we're going to do it. Nobody that I know has ever liked the idea of putting palm trees on Marine Avenue and getting rid of the eucalyptus trees. I've worked with Jody since before I got elected, talking to her about this problem and this issue, and I've worked with the Marine Avenue people that are working on the infrastructure. I've worked with the the leadership of the Balboa Island Improvement Association. I'm just trying to get everybody together to talk about these things. Nobody is trying to pull anything over anyone's eyes. Our city staff works so hard, and they do more with limited staff than I can even believe they do. And one of the things that has happened here is they started talking about infrastructure. It looked like the trees were being removed. People got upset about the trees. That wasn't even the focus. That needs to go back to the normal process of going through PB&R, and those need to be taken care of in the normal way. It's not a conspiracy to get rid. I will be the first one to vote for keeping the eucalyptus trees. And one thing I want you to consider is that if you wait until those trees are all distressed, you can do what we've had done on Poppy, where we lost all of our eucalyptus trees because they weren't dealt with one tree at a time. When a tree needs to be taken down, and it is a danger, we need to get that tree down and get another eucalyptus tree planted so that it can be growing, because that's how you keep the cycle growing of this beautiful street tree. I don't always agree with staff. They don't always do things exactly the right way. And I said to Dave, after the meeting at the Balboa Island Improvement Association in March, where I happened to be there, where everybody had their Save the Trees signs, for the street trimming, or the tree trimming to happen the following Monday, Dave never in a million years would have risked his career to plan that. That happened because it was scheduled ahead of time. Grace was new. Other people were new. It was already scheduled. It's not, they didn't know what had gone on at that meeting on Saturday, where everybody wants to save as many of these trees as possible, but we need to all be working together. What has happened in our country is we are so divided, and we are quick to condemn, and we are quick to villainize, and we are quick to make somebody our enemy just because they have a difference of opinion. They're not our enemies. They're working for us, and we are working for the best for our city. And I think everyone on this council wants to protect those trees and wants to protect the streetscape that is there. But we need to work. We also need to protect the safety of our citizens. And it's not just falling branches. It's also the ramped sidewalks, where we have an aging population. If we have sidewalks that are uneven and unsafe, we have to be careful about when our people are walking down the street as well. We take this seriously. Nobody is trying to pull anything over anyone's eyes in this group. And these people, I was not always a fan of these people on the council, when I ran, but I have never seen such hardworking people. And now that I am inside, I know that they take their duties extremely seriously here. Nobody's trying to do anything against the will of the people. I've spent 30 years getting groups together to come down here to sit in those seats. And I have to tell you that when I've worked with groups like on the library, we came down and we spoke and we sent emails, but we tried to never be insulting. I've been so insulted by some of the emails that I've gotten. And it's like saying, you don't care about this city, you don't know anything about trees. I've been working on trees for 30 years. I've protected the palm trees on Marguerite because the city staff went above and beyond when we had a fungus that threatened those entire trees. The city staff went above and beyond and found ways to keep from cutting as frequently and keep from infecting one tree to the other. These people care about trees. They love trees. It's not like us versus them and they're the evil villains that want to get rid of all the trees. They love our trees just as much as we do.
Well, thank you, Ms. Brenner. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm not sure how to follow that. That was, thank you. Going back to my point, I think it's important that we're all on the same page, and that's why we have study sessions oftentimes, is so that we can talk things out before having to make decisions. And So I think a lot of you probably thought we were going to make a decision today, and that's just not how the study session works. So I look forward to, I really have appreciated listening and learning quite a bit about this, and I look forward to hearing public comment on it too. I think if there's been a staff, if someone on staff has made a purposeful misrepresentation, then that staff member ought to be reported. I mean, that's totally inappropriate. So I don't know of it, but if the allegation up here is true, then that needs to be discussed. But there's a process. We're playing it out in terms of having our council policies working through. We've got a commission that Councilmember Brenner served on years ago, and we have some really fine, upstanding residents who have volunteered to take that role and responsibility. And I guess one of the things I would just say is it's a good reminder that when that meeting rolls around, those folks are volunteers, they're your neighbors, and there are a whole bunch of folks who just are trying to give back to the community. So when we're talking about this, it's always good to be reminded of that. So I appreciate everybody's comments up here. This is a genuinely interesting thing. I just wanted to make sure when I was talking about thing meaning conversation, this is an interesting conversation, and I wanted to make sure we're talking this process through, because admittedly I think it's been lost. So I'll give it back.
Well, let me just comment. We're not done yet. The staff still.
Yeah, no, I said I'm looking forward to public.
Yeah. Well, we're not even finished with the presentation yet. So why don't we continue with your presentation and lead into the recommendation. So again, I'll just echo these thoughts that we're all here today, and I myself wanted to have the study session expressly to allow the community, the public, to express themselves, because there was a great deal of misinformation and confusion in the community, and when that happens, we want to come together and listen to the facts. And so that's what today we are doing. And the Mayor Pro Tem is correct. We may be making some recommendations, but there's no action or final action. This is just, we're early days in a long process here. But the maintenance of our city's trees, as we discussed at the February study session, this is an ongoing process that's led and managed by professional tree experts, and I don't think any of us up here is considered a tree expert. That's why we hire tree experts. And so why don't we let them proceed to conclude your presentation then, if you would, please.
And on that note, I'll mention, Mayor, that so Kevin has recommended that 10 of the trees go forward to be removed now. One of them's already dead, 9 of the trees. And he's also saying we're going to be watching the other 17 trees and possibly removing those possibly over the next 2 or 3 years. We have a detailed presentation on each tree we thought you might want to know about, or we could skip to the end to Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill's account. We aren't recommending an action. We just wanted to show you what the path forward is, if you so choose, or we could spend the time going through each tree.
Well, I think you should go to the next page. It's not numbered. The summary of recommendations. Would you do that?
So go ahead, and Kevin, you got a table right there. You can speak to that.
Yeah. And then I do want to reiterate that the removals on Marine Avenue aren't new. I mean, we've removed and replaced all the trees on Marine Avenue over the last 100 years. So I think the only thing maybe unique in this case is that it's a larger number. I know that this was proposed before, back in like 2012. People had proposed removing these, and I think maybe staff bowed to public pressure at that point, and that's what I have to say about that. But summary of recommendations, again, the Arborgate report was a maintenance review. It didn't include a risk assessment. It did include 3 tree removals. Our consulting arborist Walt Warner's report was a maintenance review as well. It included a risk assessment, and he recommended 27 trees plus. The plus means that he wanted to reassess trees after the initial year to see if he recommended more removals. My review was a maintenance review. I did a partial risk assessment, meaning that I risk assessed the 27 trees that he concluded that were high risk. I am proposing year 1, 10 trees to be removed, and then in subsequent years, based on reassessment, another 17 or more.
let me just clarify, the removal would result in a replacement of what type of tree?
Eucalyptus, we would be going back in with a eucalyptus tree.
At what size? Mature?
24-inch box.
And what is the approximate height of that tree?
There's some examples
All
later
right.
on.
Okay.
I'd like to get to the next.
So this is an exhibit of where the removals would occur. They're red. The yellow would be the high-risk trees that need reevaluation. The green are moderate to low-risk trees, and the boxes are the empty spaces right now.
Do you have any city records that can explain the history of the maintenance of the trees? I mean, the periodic removal and replacement of the eucalyptus trees on Marine Avenue over the last 50 years, not 100 years, but maybe 30, 40, 50 years? Do we have any records to that effect?
No, our inventory system goes back to I think 1999 when West Coast Arborists started with us. And then there's not a lot of detail because we switched from West Coast Arborists to Great Scott.
Okay.
So, Kevin, I'm going to recommend, for the sake of the time right now, that we jump to the proposed path forward so people know where we're going with this discussion. If you could flip to that slide. And we'll keep all the slides in it. If anybody wants to look at the various tree slides and what we're recommending, why, they'll be available online for you.
So I'd like to start with this one. These are the current vacant tree well locations. These where we would be planting new 24-inch box eucalyptus trees. So the proposed path forward regarding Marine Avenue, again, currently there's a dead tree at 315 Marine Avenue that we already advised Park, Beaches, and Recreation Commission that we need to remove that tree after Labor Day. We will plan to go to PBNR, as already was mentioned, to recommend the removal of 9 other high-risk trees, and we will wait for their approval on that. If we get their concurrence, we'll schedule those removals and replacements. After the removals and replacements, if approved, we'll make any necessary hardscape repairs around the tree wells where the trees were removed, such as uplifted concrete or broken curbs. We'll also probably be ramping, like I said, the other trees that we're retaining with asphalt ramps or concrete patches. If approved, we'll be replanting the 15 tree wells with 24-inch box eucalyptus. Again, the 5 current vacant sites and then the 10 removals. And then we'll arrange for the ongoing watering of the trees with a water truck, or we might be able to get merchant volunteers to help. And then we'll continue with our annual inspections and trimming of the Marine Avenue trees.
Excuse me, Mr. Avery.
I guess there's no such thing as a no-risk eucalyptus tree, right?
Well,
they're all risky.
Yeah, I mean, there's a range, from
Right.
low to high.
And if I'm going to be assessing the condition of the trees and make a report and give it to the city, I'm going to be very conservative, and I would err on the side of taking out more trees than not, just because of a CYA situation.
Right. I would suspect that any arborist out there that would have to write a tree risk assessment would be very conservative. If they have to put their name to it, and they might take on some sort of liability.
So on this next page, if you want to forward that, so this comparison to the 6-foot.
Yeah, these would be examples of what would go back in to the 15 sites if approved. The eucalyptus trees are rapid growers. 60% of their growth is established within the first 10 years. These are pretty good examples. You could see about 8 to 10 foot tall trees with a very narrow canopy.
Let me go back just to ask a question where the consultant has recommended 27 and you're recommending 10 tree removals, correct? Why? Are you succumbing to any kind of political pressure because a room full of people don't want any trees to come down, or you're comfortable with that decision?
I'm comfortable with that decision. I believe that I'd like to do a progressive approach, a balanced approach. I feel that the 17 other trees, can be reassessed. I do feel strongly that within the next 2 to 3 years that most of those other 17 trees be removed too.
And replaced.
Yes.
When you talk about ramp on the sidewalk or asphalt, is my understanding and visually in my mind's eye is that because the sidewalk is buckling, because we cannot do anything about the roots, that the roots are buckling, and so you put an asphalt ramp there for people to walk on.
Correct. So you have a smooth surface to walk on. It would have to be within ADA guidelines. You'd want it smooth, but again, you're going to be putting that asphalt ramp on because I wouldn't recommend removing the existing concrete around the trees. I would think any work done, even removal of the existing concrete, could cause a tree failure.
Okay, so you're trying to protect those roots.
Yes.
And hopefully we're protecting members of the public walking on those sidewalks by creating a smooth surface. Okay, so you're now at the comments and questions page?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions of members of council?
I was just going to say, if you want to talk more about the project again, I think John Noyes would probably be the best to discuss that because it's another topic, but it does need to be addressed.
I was going to get to Mr. Noyes, but I just wanted to ask any other, Mr. Duffield, one other question.
Thank you, Mayor. Real fast. Would you say that the eucalyptus tree grows 2 feet a year? I saw the 60% thing, but in terms of feet, if you put in a 10-foot tree, in a year will it be 12 feet? In 5 years will it double in size? I mean, that kind of thing.
Well, the first year I think it would need to get established, so it might be like 1 to 2 years that first year. But once the roots establish and that they're getting into the native soil and out of kind of where they were in their box and adjusting to the site, then they might even grow faster than maybe up to 2 to 4 feet, and then they slow down once they age.
And then we've removed the synthetic turf because that was inhibiting proper watering. Is that true?
Right. That was trapping moisture around the crown, the root crown of the tree, and that area is very critical for tree health. If you have trap in that moisture, it could cause fungus, decay around that very sensitive area.
So maybe we inadvertently, city, public, whatever, over the years, maybe contributed to some hazardous conditions with the tree, in terms of the tree health.
Yeah, but some of that was, the DG cap and the artificial turf was necessary for making sure that there's no tripping hazards as well.
So now what have we done? Is it exposed now?
Yes, the artificial turf is gone. The crowns are exposed. There are some root collars, that's the technical term, that are buried still out there, and that's not a good thing. But then you would have a deeper tree well, and you would have more, a liability on your hands as far as trip and falls.
Okay. Seeing no further questions here, Mr. Noyes, why don't you? We'd like to hear from your organization and your role and how you got here.
All good questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak because what's really important to us is our relationship with the City Council and as a business association and our relationship with the residents on the island. And we don't certainly want to look like we're the ones that are trying to take out the trees.
Can I just interrupt you one moment, please? Mayor Pro Tem has a comment.
Can I ask how long the presentation would be? Because
I'm going to make it as quick as I can. I'm not going to take up your time. I realize it's late.
Yeah, the reason there are 2 reasons. One is the goal of this really was to only talk about maintenance. So the project itself is so far down the path that we have a bunch of people here to speak. So I just want to make sure when we're.
I think the nexus is the fact that the project has been the catalyst for the tree issue.
So just talk briefly, if you would, about the project, because as Mr. Mayor Pro Tem says, we're here to talk about the trees, but just explain that nexus, if you would, please.
To be clear, I don't believe that's. I'm sorry, I don't think that's right. I think that the tree issue is the tree issue, and the project issue is its own separate thing. And that's why I want to make sure I'm understanding this. We didn't do a risk assessment because we're having a discussion years down the road on a project. We're having a discussion about the project separately, and we had a risk assessment because we had someone ask for it. So I just want to make sure we're keeping focus here on this. And I don't mean to interrupt you too much, Mr. Noyes, but I would really love to get to some of the public comments on this, on the, the issue at hand, but go ahead.
Well, please proceed quickly.
Part of the reason that I'm speaking to is that, the business associations are the most impacted by the removal of the trees or the continuation of the trees or the project. Our purpose when we met with the city was to team build with the staff and ourselves. We were also there to get an education, which we got over about 10 meetings with city staff. And we wanted to get the budget realistic. We realized that the trees were going to be an issue. We thought in the beginning that the trees were going to have to go and that we were going to have to replace them. So we were trying to bring together people that would realize that we had to get the budget up or we had to raise the money ourselves to get big trees in place. We began our meetings in February. Since then, we've had 12, February 2017, excuse me. We've had 12 meetings, one field trip with city staff. I've given you minutes and a sampling of those meetings. We've done an amazing amount of outreach on the tree issue. We've had an open house. We had 150 people respond. You'll see the survey in there. There's like 42 or so cards that people actually filled out. But another problem is that like any small business district, we are owned by the city. We're not an independent business district. You own our infrastructure. We're totally dependent on the things that you do for us, and that affects our economy. So it's very important that we get our message out. In the eventual plan, we have to put more things into it. I know now, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm talking about the project, but we need to have other options on our plan. It's not just about the trees. It's about having some transportation options, having some Uber and those kind of things, places where when we redesign the street that these things are going to help us. And again, we're a city-owned project. We're a mixed-use project, but we're not treated like a mixed-use project. The city treats us like there's no relationship between each lot. It's all one thing, and it is. Otherwise, too, I want you to know that we do have a lot of fun doing all these things. We'd like to keep a good relationship with you, keep a good relationship with the residents, and so it's really good. And we've had a lot of misinformation's been put out about us personally. Not good stuff. So I'm going to quit because I know other people want to speak, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noyes. All right, now we'll go to public comment. And as I said earlier, a couple things, just the process and procedure here. If you would like to speak, please line up in the center aisle one at a time. And 2 minutes is your time period. And identify your name, and we'll start. Please proceed.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Kevin Muldoon, for being a support of the preservation that Balboa Island residents would like. Frankly, the plan to overhaul Marine Avenue started in 2017. The community was told that our trees were diseased and dangerous before any report was ever done. The community believes that all objectivity of Marine Avenue trees from Public Works has gone out the window. The report that Walt Warner is simply a hit piece to get rid of the trees. It's not accurate. And we have our arborists here today. Unfortunately, we thought we were going to get equal time. Our arborists are here today to dispute what's in his report. In addition to additional independent assessments, the BIPA took samples of leaves and bark of our trees because the community was being told that they were diseased and dangerous. We took them to Waypoint Labs, and there's no pathogens and no disease in our trees whatsoever. The Public Works recommendation of pending removal was based on Warner's report, in which the city states that our trees have heartwood decay. A lot of the report says possible, and then tree 220, Marine Avenue, has heartwood decay. Well, I'd like to show you what heartwood decay looks like. This is heartwood decay. This is what Walt Warner's report said that our tree had. I'd like you to know that we had a topiary sonographic done, which is very expensive, and not very many people know how to do it. And that tree on 220 actually has 0 heartwood decay. This is testing of the tree. Now, this isn't assumptions or just theory. This is actual hard science. And you'll hear from our arborist that this wasn't a risk tree assessment. It says nowhere on the report.
Ma'am, if you
that
can
it's a
speak
tree
into the
risk
mic,
assessment.
otherwise the camera won't pick you up.
Nowhere in the report says it's a tree risk assessment. The title is a tree evaluation. What we want from this meeting is that we would like the Marine Avenue Preservation Committee that was brought forth by Kevin Muldoon. What is that?
Is that 2 minutes? You have to,
I mean, we've had an hour and 15 minutes. This is why we are feeling this whole process is not transparent.
well,
That's how we're
we've got a lineup of people speaking 2 minutes. I'll give you 1 more minute because you're the leader of the group. So if you could, you would, please, let her proceed.
Diane, can we kind of talk about that? Because I do feel like she is the one that's brought their whole she should be able to make her presentation.
Well, I just said she could, for more, what you need, how much time do you need?
I would like to have, well, actually the same amount of time these people had, but
Well, please.
I would like to have our people that we brought in, our professionals that we brought in, to give you're looking for the facts.
Yes.
If you really want the facts, you need to hear from our people.
That's, okay, after you speak, if you could speak for, how much time do you need? 3 minutes?
Give me 3 more minutes.
Okay, and then your professionals could speak next.
Yes, we'd like our arborist to speak first. Bob, could let our arborist
All right,
speak.
that's fine.
Okay, on behalf of the BIPA and thousands of concerned Balboa Island residents, we request that the City Council adopt an emergency and temporary resolution prohibiting the city, including Public Works and any public contractors, from taking any action with respect to the Marine Avenue eucalyptus trees, including removal, until the CPBR Commission has held a public hearing and passed a resolution authorizing this action. The City Council can decide this matter constitutes an emergency situation because of the actual or threatened disruption of public facilities. Removing the subject trees would disrupt the public street and public sidewalk of Marine Avenue, both of which are public facilities. 2/3 of the present members of the City Council can determine that there is a need for an immediate action and the need to take action which came to the attention of the local agencies subsequent to the agenda being posted. Here, it was unknown until after the agenda was posted that Public Works intends to remove the subject trees next week, which is what Jeff Herdman has been telling our community, but he's recused, without obtaining required approval from the commission. Last part, to ensure the city complies with applicable laws, including the California Environmental Quality Act, the SISTI system must halt that threatened action until the commission authorization is obtained following a public hearing. Even Mr. Webb has publicly acknowledged in an article at the Orange County Register yesterday that removal of the trees would require the approval of the commission. However, it seems his department has other intentions. We need to ensure that what happens, and given the lack of transparency with this process thus far, the City Council emergency and temporary resolution is required. Thank you very much. And we'd like to hear from our arborist, please.
All right, thank you. Let me just clarify, Mr. Webb, were the 10 trees, the future of those 10 trees going to go as a recommendation from staff to the PBNR Commission?
Yes, right now we're planning going to September.
Okay, so do we need a resolution to decide that? That's already on track to do
I
that?
don't think you need a resolution. There's a normal process through your policy to go through that. That was one of the rumors I've heard, that we're going to come in next week and take the trees out.
That is not true.
And that's not true. That is not something we're
All
planning.
right, so will be a public hearing. Do you know the date? Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, you said it was September 10th? 3rd? September 3rd, the Public Beaches and Recreation, Parks, Beaches and Recreation Commission will be meeting, and the recommendation for these 10 trees will be as an agenda item at that meeting.
Yes, there's 9 trees actually, because
Yes,
one's already...
one's already dead. Okay. Are you one of the professionals?
Yes, I am.
Oh, please identify yourself, please.
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, I'm Mark Porter. I'm a consulting arborist. The Balboa Island Preservation Association hired me to provide an independent evaluation of Walt Warnier's report. And right from the beginning in the introduction of Warnier's report, I had a little bit of concern because it went right into problems with the trees. So there's no mention of any value, benefit, or utility of the trees on Marine Avenue, which, according to residents, sets the stage right away for removal. And I think that's true. Both Warning's report and the city summary of Warning's report do not provide any opportunity for balance, just one mitigation option, and that's removal. Tree risk mitigation should consider alternative risk reduction strategies. Nothing's mentioned. It's not talked about at all. Those should not be disproportionate to the value, benefit, or utility the trees provide. But if we fail to mention value or benefit, there's no balance. Nothing. It's one way. Most trees on Marine Avenue are lemon-scented gum, which are very, very successful street trees by many cities. It's one of the most well-behaved species of all the ukes. There's about 300 introduced in California. There's about 100 left that work, and that's one of the ones that work. I have very important tree failure statistics that were not mentioned in any of the reports from the California Tree Failure Report Program that started in 1987. I've been to almost every meeting since it started. In Half Moon Bay, California, I helped get it in Fullerton. We have 2 meetings a year. I haven't seen anybody here. Walt Warner's report uses words like maybe, possibly, likely. There are no mention of a level 3 advanced risk assessment in neither Walt's or staff's. A level 3 is advanced testing, like what Jody showed with sonic tomography. In the reports, there's no mention of drilling or resistance testing, no sonic tomography, no root crown excavation to assess root decay, no ground-penetrating radar to map tree roots, no proof of heartwood decay, and no lab reports, no recorded measure of lean, and no mention of self-correction. The report calls asymmetrical a defect. Eucalyptus by nature asymmetrical. Looking at on the internet of the eucalyptus trees in their native land in Australia, they're not perfect symmetrical like a pine tree in the forest. In addition, there's no pull tests and no suggested use of inclinometer or recordable tilt sensors to check tilt over potential. These stats are very, very important to managing risk. And they said since 1987, there's 6,000 tree failure reports. All the lemon-scented ukes that failed, of all the reports generated, 6,000 reports, there's only 21. 21 generated failure reports. And of root failures, having the whole tree fall over, there's only 3. That's not very many.
Did you want to conclude?
Oh, could I finish, please? Should testing the report condemns the trees without testing. Think of putting a loved one on hospice without an X-ray lab test, an MRI, or without proper clinical diagnosis. Should testing have taken place to justify this severe of a recommendation? The answer is clear, yes, should have been done. It's my professional opinion that Balboa Island Preservation Association concerns are not only legitimate, their concerns are both valid and sound. Thank you very much, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Please, no, please no comments. Okay, the next professional consultant who's here, would you please come forward and identify yourself?
My name is Greg Applegate. You have my report. I was the first and for a while the only certified tree risk assessor in the state. If I had known that this was going to be a tree risk assessment, I would have done one. It wouldn't agree very much at all with the one you have. But anyway, I was an expert witness on the tree that fell on Irvine Avenue. You probably remember that case. That tree was a blue gum, not a lemon gum. It fell because there were no roots on the side of the left turn lane that was built a few years before. They cut the roots on one side less than a foot from the trunk. Hardly the tree's fault. I got to see that stump after it was pulled out of the ground. There's no true statistics for tree failures except what's reported by volunteers to the California Tree Failure Report Program that Mark mentioned. Blue gums have a bad reputation, but they're found all up and down the state. They're very common. They're often the biggest and oldest trees left over from agricultural windrows and preserved without sufficient clearance for the roots. There's no blue gums, fortunately, on Marine Way, though. Many eucalyptus trees, including the lemon gum trees on Marine Avenue, are very good street trees due to their growth habit. They don't drop messy fruit. They're very decay resistant. They let some sun through. And for their size, the roots are very fine and don't do much paving damage as many other trees of similar size would. I didn't find any root decay where it was mentioned in the city's arborist report. There was one time I thought I saw what he was talking about. I probed it, and it turned out it was just a few layers of bark that accumulated at the soil line. Marine Avenue trees are well suited to this environment. They've caused very little damage, especially considering the small space that they're growing in. I think they have many good years left if the risk that's mentioned is mitigated. And again, I only thought 3 trees needed to be removed. One was dead, and one's that great big one in front of Starbucks. Anyway, I hope the city will stop the lion tailing and stuff that's been going on, but a lot of tree services, that seems to be the only thing they know. Any kind of retrenchment and bringing the trees in, that would really help. Lion tailing that's been done actually increases the limb drop and limb failure. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Well, thank you so much, sir. Any other professional comments? Are there any other professional tree are you a consultant?
Not an arborist, but I am counsel to the BIPA. So I would consider myself a professional.
Okay. All right. What's your name, please?
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. My name is Jim Maloney. I'm a partner with Gibbs & Dunn. I was first brought in when Jody started her campaign to look into what the city was doing. At first, I was skeptical, like many of you, that something would be out of place. I, in the past 6 months, have served public records requests on the city. I've gotten hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of documents from the city. I accompanied Jody and her members to meet with city staff, in particular Dave Webb, Micah, and Grace, and we spoke with them about the residents' concerns about the trees. And I guess we brought up the fact that the city has a tree policy. We asked them about the tree policy. How come they're not complying with it? They didn't have an answer. They said there's some development coming. All the trees are going to have to come out. So why put eucalyptus back in these planter boxes when they're going to come back out a year or two later? That was my first concern. We were in that meeting for 3 hours. And where I really got concerned is when we were conveying the importance of the trees to the residents. And Mr. Webb, I'm sorry, but you'll remember what you said. You said to us, when all those trees are gone, 6 months later, no one's going to remember them. And at that moment, I knew the staff for the city here was biased, that no matter what we said, no matter what we brought up, their decision was made. And I would point out, this was before they hired Walt Warner. This is before they got the expert reports to contradict Jody and the BIPA's specific reports. This was very troubling to me, which is why we've continued with the public records reports, and we've continued to try to create transparency to the residents to know what's going on. Because to go after the trees in the manner, I understand public safety, and you made that your point. But then when we looked at the reports and we found out that the city wasn't not only following its policy, but as the other two arborists said, weren't conducting the requisite tests, then it just, things didn't add up. And so I would just, you know, Ms. Brenner, you've ridden in my Mustang in the Balboa Parade, and I honestly, I sincerely believe you want to do what's best. And I'm not suggesting that we have people get hit by limbs. But when the BIPA tried to stop the trimming in March, and the city proceeded anyway, and then 2 months later, the city's own arborist, Walt Warner, comes up with a report that says the trees have been over-trimmed, and they've been lion's-tailed, and the LCR, the live crown ratio, is too low. Now we have to take it out. It really makes me wonder, what was the rush to trim the trees? The BIPA has simply been asking for a moratorium to slow down the tree trimming. We understand these trees are supposed to be trimmed once every 5 years. And when we see these pictures of a tree limb that fell in October of 2018, it makes me wonder, was that because of the tree trimmer that the city used? Because they lion's-tailed the tree? Is that why the branch came down? I don't think because we see a branch lying on the sidewalk that necessarily means the trees are a hazard to public safety. I think it means we need to take a look at who's trimming the trees, why are they trimming the trees, how often are they trimming the trees, and where is all this going? And I'll leave the time for questions or anyone else, but I had a nice, disciplined, clean thing here, but after hearing what I heard, I had to get to the point.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there another tree professional or representative of BIPA?
Thank you.
Thank you. Shh, please. Everybody's going to be spoken. Please refrain from speaking, but if we are now in literal public comment, we'll go to the 2-minute period.
Yeah, he's a
Casper's a professional.
I am.
Oh, you're one more professional.
I'm a professional.
Okay, all right. Okay, professionals speak.
I want to say my name is Casper Yen. Thank you to the City Council for having us here, opportunity to speak to you guys, and to the audience members for coming. I wanted to talk about the city's tree policy. It appears that the city hasn't been following it, and I will go ahead and excerpt from the tree policy here so that the audience is aware. Eucalyptus trees are designated as special neighborhood trees, and as such, give a certain character to the neighborhood, which I think we can all agree that the eucalyptus trees on Marine Avenue does do. For instance, earlier today, the city staff members talked about the installation of astroturf around the trees, which I think we can all agree is not beneficial to the health of the tree, and I believe they have been recently removed, but why has that been in place for the last 10 years? The over-trimming the tree, which Mr. Maloney just mentioned, that, as evidenced by the city's own arborist report, the trees have been over-trimmed, and yet the city is having trees trimmed in that method. The number of times the trees have been trimmed as well is of concern. Trees have been trimmed on a pretty regular basis, not every 5 years or every 2 years, the contractors have been doing. The recent removal of the trees in 2017 is also concerning because during this, the city staff here represented to us that the trees that are being removed will then be replaced with like-kind trees, which is exactly what the policy states, which are trees that are replaced one for one with like-kind trees. Yet, in part of our Public Records Act request, we have received emails and we've reviewed emails where the city staff has essentially said that eucalyptus trees are not suitable for the coast, and those are not the type of trees that they're looking for to be replaced in this area. And I think that kind of goes to the transparency argument that we're trying to make, which is the city tells us one thing, yet does another. And that is very concerning to the community as a whole. And I think I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now we'll go to regular, oh, excuse me, are you another?
I'm Walt Warner.
All right, Mr. Warner, why don't you speak? Your name has been mentioned, go right ahead.
Booing when you hear my name, and Mark, I've known you for 25 years, it's pronounced Warner, not Warnier, okay? So I just want to correct that, okay? Just some brief background on my history. I've been in the business since 1975. I've focused on urban forestry since about 1986. The 27 trees that I recommended for removal should absolutely be removed. They pose an aggregate risk. One tree by itself poses a risk to people, but when you have 27 trees posing a risk to multiple locations in a concentrated area, I think it poses a higher level of risk. Yes, Mark is correct in saying that third-level testing is an option. However, you have to weigh out the benefits and the costs. Those third-level testings, they're fun to do, but they're expensive for the city to do, and it's expensive to conduct, and it costs a lot of money. When you look at the value of the tree, the actual appraised value of the tree compared to the amount of money you would spend trying to save the tree, you weigh those costs out, and I felt that the cost to retain those trees or do the third-level testing would exceed the value of the trees. The trees that we see today are just a snapshot in time. They're not the same 100-year-old trees that the rumor goes around that people are under the assumption that we've got ancient trees or special trees on Marine Avenue. They're special in the sense that they provide ambiance to Marine Avenue. They're very attractive. They do a lot for the shade, but they provide a lot of risk as well. They've most likely been replaced in the past for the same reasons that they're recommended for removal now. They've done hardscape damage, they've probably dropped branches, they probably posed a risk, and urban forestry not being as advanced then as it is today, the way they dealt with it was remove and replace. That was the standard process. There's a past history of failures of eucalyptus trees. Not just the Eucalyptus citriodora or the Corymbia citriodora now. Eucalyptus trees as a whole are a high-risk species. I've had tens of thousands of eucalyptus trees under my care. I've dissected thousands of eucalyptus trees. What you see above ground with those eucalyptus trees is probably 50 times greater in what's underground holding that tree in ground. There's not a lot of root mass to those trees. That's why those trees are not causing a lot of hardscape damage. There's not a lot of roots there. So when you do start cutting roots, you increase the potential risk. When you have a asymmetrical crown with a leaning tree and not a large root mass holding the tree in place, you have a risky tree. So I will leave it at that, but when I said suspected hardwood, that's because I did not do any invasive testing. But the history that surrounds the tree leads to, in my history, in my experience, there was decay, and that's the tree's natural defense mechanism, is to produce new wood around the decay. So a lot of times you might find a healthy sounding eucalyptus tree, but inside there is going to be decay. That's why I said suspected. I did not say confirmed decay, hardwood decay. So I'll leave those comments at that. But my recommendation, I stand behind my recommendation. I am not a hitman. I'm an arborist, and I'm an urban forester. I'll be the first one to stand up and say this tree should absolutely remain. But I'll also be the first person to say this tree needs to be removed because it poses a risk that's unnecessary. And I would think with the history of tree failures in this city, then the City Council would take this more into consideration. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. All right, now we'll go to public comments at the 2-minute.
I'm not a professional, but I'm a 30-year resident. Bob Rush, you all know me. I totally agree with Ms. Brenner. I think we all should work together. The problem is it requires good faith on all parties. And when we don't have good faith or we act in an unethical or corrupt manner, it weakens the process, it creates doubt, and it causes problems, which is what's happened here. I draw your attention to an exhibit that I distributed to you guys. In August of 2017, the FPPC was contacted and responded with a reply of whether or not Councilman Herdman had a conflict with respect to Marina Avenue project. They came back and they said absolutely he has an ethical conflict and he cannot work on the project at all. But since this letter came out, I've discovered as much as 24 violations, and what I would call egregious violations. So he's directing staff, he's directing city manager, he's directing Department of Utilities people. He's embedded himself so intensely into the process, the Marina Avenue renovation process, as well as the trees, that you can't distinguish his actions from that of operations. So I'm alerting you to this fact that, one, this is happening and it's destroying the process, in my opinion. It's one of the main reasons it's destroyed. He actually directed staff to hide information from the city, from the public. Now, that goes to the heart of the issue, the distrust. I'm going to be submitting this to the FPPC, and it's going to be a severe problem for Mr. Herdman because he's already been warned about his conflict. He's already been warned about previous ethical violations, and I would respectfully request you folks to either censure him or remove him from this stuff or remove him from the bench or the dais, because this is egregious, and he's aware of it. He's actually commented on it in some of his emails, and he's still embedded in the process, all phases of the process, and directing staff. And so I feel sorry for the staff because they're subject to his direction, even though, okay.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Next speaker, please. 2 minutes.
I'm Seymour Beek, and
live on Balboa Island. I'm a longtime resident, and I have visited Marine Avenue many times and admire the trees on Marine Avenue. I think they contribute to a nice ambience for that locale, and I have spent very little time lying awake at night worrying about the risk of those trees falling on me. But the main message I have for you guys is I think that you should discourage any future planning going forward with a grand plan that involves removal of the trees. I think they're important and important to a lot of people on the island. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name's Ed Black. I was going to do an introduction, but we're well past that. But I would like to refer to Mr. Warner's definition of value, because we have a different definition.
Could you talk louder, please?
Oh, we have a different definition. An LA Times reporter recently wrote a column about Marine Avenue, describing it as Rockwellian, inspired by the famous painter of Americana, Norman Rockwell. Walking amongst the towering trees, framing boutiques and cafes, I certainly feel the nostalgia. This hearkening back to an earlier time is exactly what draws tourists to the island from around the world, and the iconic trees are a big part of it. Balboa Island is arguably the jewel of Newport Beach, and Marine Avenue and its landmark trees are the center of that jewel. These trees are far more valuable to me and most of the people here than apparently they are to Mr. Warner. The BIPA has retained the services of 3 certified independent arborists. The city hired their own arborist. For trees as historic and iconic as the ones on Marine Avenue, you would think both sides would want to compare all 4 evaluations in the interest of fairness and accuracy. Well, at least the BIPA did. The arborists have spoke to the problems with the Warner report, but I went through the report tree by tree, all the reports, and fully 10% of the eucalyptus trees, the BIPA arborists identified the trees as one species, and the city independent arborist identified it as another. If you can't even get the species right, you might assume there could be other discrepancies, and I would sure want to analyze these reports further before I went cutting down these magnificent trees.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Randy Black. My family has been in Newport Beach since 1926, not as long as Mr. Beek, but fairly close. We're being told here that the citizens are confused. They've confused these issues. We have not. The city's planned reconstruction of Marine Avenue is inextricably linked with the removal of the historic trees. It's just easier and cheaper to install infrastructure if you don't have to work around historic elements. You know, we're being told it's too expensive to do testing on these trees. It's just cheaper to pull them out and plant some very small 24-inch box trees. And it's cheaper and easier to do it all in one fell swoop. You know, let's get rid of 64% of the trees in maybe next year or so. It's just cheaper and easier to do that. These people do not understand value. People have talked about the cultural and historic value of this. How about the economic value? Mature studies show that mature trees add 10 to 20% to the property values. They increase retail rents by 9 to 12%. You know, they increase the retail spending by several percent on average. So when we're saying, oh, we're going to rip out the trees because it's a few cents easier, cheaper to do that, we're leaving on the table, you know, much more money than that. And don't forget, you know, the iconic experience of Newport Beach is walking down Marine Avenue, buying a Balboa bar, getting a frozen banana, walking under a canopy of trees. This is famous to, you know, viewers of Arrested Development, the OC, etc. What are we going to do with these tourists when they come? Oh, you know, these little trees are fine, and we know it doesn't look like you were kind of expecting it to look, but, you know, it was cheaper and it was easier to just do it all in one fell swoop without, without actually doing the testing and all the other risk analysis that really ought to be made. And I will just finish with saying, we're being told here, oh, it's a process, there's a normal procedure, move along, nothing to hear here. But no, it's imminent, we're being told. There's going to be a PB&R meeting next couple of weeks. Then we're going to remove 10 trees, and then we're going to remove another 27 trees, and then we're going to reevaluate the remaining few trees, all conveniently in time that we can do our massive reconstruction of Marine Avenue. This is a council matter. We are looking to the council to give direction to staff on where they want to go with this. You know, this is something where I would hope that you will listen to the public opinion on
Sure.
this matter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Black. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Dennis Bress, Balboa Island, and want to thank you so much, Council, for having this study session. This is really informative. As you know, I'm advocating for the community to engage with our council members and with our city, and I think what you're seeing right here is a great representation, Joy, of our great United States, right? That's the way this is supposed to work. So thank you for the time. I did hear mention PB&R, so I'm looking forward to having a PB&R after this meeting here. That's a Pabst Blue Ribbon, by the way. So anyways, I'll just cut to the chase. If anyone's gone to Orange in the Orange Circle, you'll see what they were able to do up there. They have a great city. It's like you're transported in time when you get to the Orange Circle. That's basically what we're saying, and you guys are well aware of what we have on Marine Avenue. It's very special. So the bottom line is we have a discrepancy between some reporting based on taking 27 trees out or 3 out. I think we can deal with 3 trees for sure. We want and need life cycle tree management for sure. And I understand the timing based on things. But we have empty wells right now, so I would say the sooner we can get the city to get a known eucalyptus replacement that you guys are recommending, and maybe we can give you some input there, then we could actually, as a community, see that tree and watch it being placed and understand conceptually what we're going to look at as we continue to go through this life cycle tree management. So the discrepancies between 3 and 27, that's what's got us all scared. Lack of communication and the fact that, and I'll be clear, I was down there in the morning, and when they started that tree trimming process, it was dark. And the guy in the bucket at the top that was doing the supposedly very specific tree trimming had a hard hat on with a flashlight. And how can the supervisor give him information to make those cuts? And by the end of that process, there were a bunch of limbs on the ground. So starting out in the dark is not a good thing. So it's a series of events. So I'm just asking for 2 things. One, a moratorium on tree cutting. And as I understand it, you're going to warn us before trucks come down there to cut any trees, correct? So we don't have to be worried. And 2, let's form the Balboa Island Preservation Committee, and that would be a group of people who would interface with you and staff and communicate back with the BIPA and the BIIA for all the residents of Balboa Island. So thanks for everything you're doing, and keep up the good work. We want to engage and work with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Mike Sullivan here. I've lived on Marine Avenue for 40 years. I heard a phrase 2 hours ago. The right tree for the right spot. Now, being that this is a study session, let's see, what is the right tree for the right spot? So why don't we hear from each one of our experts to come up here and say what he thinks is the right tree for this particular spot, and let's go home.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name's Dick Ashoff, and I live on Balboa Island. It's very easy. You have a great example
of what can happen. Take a walk over to Balboa Village. They took all those trees out. They haven't been replaced. There are pots. It's barren. So all I ask is once the trees are gone, they're gone. So tread lightly. You have a great example to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comments? Please come forward. No, sorry. Sorry. Why don't I bring it back to the dais and ask my colleagues to speak? Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you, Mayor. I am no tree hugger, but I am a sap. And my wife and I, our first date, we walked around Balboa Island. And there's something incredibly special about what we have. I can only think of a couple other streets in Orange County that really compete. El Camino Real at San Juan Capistrano, Laguna Beach's Main Street, perhaps Old Town Orange's Circle. I believe that there is a middle ground that we can reach between 3 and 10 plus 17. And that's my simple request. I do think that there is a nexus. I don't think, Councilwoman Brenner, that staff is being necessarily doing this of their own volition. So I don't think that it is always of their own free will, but I do think that there's something going on that causes us all to have pause and say this is not right how it's been done. It's easily corrected. Let's put a moratorium on trimming, which we wouldn't do anyways, and also taking down the trees. Well, let's consult with these other experts as well with Mr. Warner. Let's include the new technology that was used to analyze these trees, and let's be incredibly selective, hoping to remove no more than 3 trees, get some new trees in those wells quickly, sooner rather than later, so those have a chance to be tall, and then we continue the cycle in a thoughtful way that protects the charm of Marine Avenue. So I'm going to indicate to staff at this study session that that is my desire of staff. I'm not going to make an motion. I don't want to put any of my colleagues on the hot seat, but that is my articulation of staff, and my colleagues are welcome to join. I think that's reasonable.
All right, well, hold your thoughts here. We'll go down the line. Mr. Avery, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. The question of value is what I was thinking about, and it was brought up by several people. And certainly it's not the retail value of the tree as it exists now, or maybe the retail value of the sapling. It's the value of the community, and I think it's been expressed here quite well. And I think everyone who's in this town knows it. And when you go over that bridge and you see those trees, you're just going up, and it's iconic. And they're very expensive. You know, if you're going to keep trees like that, just like on Palm Avenue where it was completely denuded, I mean, that was crazy to me. I lived on the Balboa Peninsula Point when I was a kid for years, and those trees were there. And so what that means is we have to put more money. We value those trees so much. We value the trees on Marine Avenue. We used to value the trees on Palm Avenue. But those trees, in my view, should have been saved. No doubt they were doing a lot of roots were doing a lot of damage, but there's lots of things you can do to contain those roots and work around it. But it would have taken time and effort and money. But I think most of the people in the community would probably say, yes, it's worth it because of the value there. And I feel the same way about the Balboa Island trees. We need to do everything we can to preserve them, to save them, and recognize what this community is saying, that we have to spend a little extra money, whatever it takes, really, because this is like a historic district, and the trees are a vital part of it. And my last comment would be the staff here and Public Works is tremendous. We have the greatest staff, and it really gets me when they are disparaged by people. I understand the fear, and like all of us, everybody makes mistakes, but they're terrific in this because I've worked with them and I've seen them, and it's just been a pleasure. So this is a great meeting for me because you just feel the passion of this town and what a special place Balboa Island is. So I think the message is very clear. I don't think you have to worry about the trees, and I don't have to worry because I feel the same way as you do because my wife and I go around Balboa Island about 3 times a week, so we see them. But I agree with Joy in the sense that we need to really work hard. I'm not online. I don't go online for the reason that I heard about, the vilification, the nastiness. It's just uncalled for when we can get together and meet and talk as a community. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duffield.
Thank you, Mayor. Whew, I've never been nervous before to talk. Holy moly, I hope I say the right thing. I just think that the priority of our staff has always been to do things as economically reasonable as possible, and I think their approach was exactly that. And as well as when they factor in what happened on Irvine Boulevard, you know, that just never leaves our mind. So I think they were doing the right thing as we have instructed them. However, at this meeting, what I'm hearing is we need to reprioritize and spend more money. And I think that's what I'm hearing. I know it's hard to get money out of the Finance Committee. I've been trying for 3 years but anyway, that's, I think in a nutshell, that I would agree with. I didn't originally agree with Councilman Muldoon, but as the evening progressed, I would have to say I'm in his camp. But also I want to say what Councilman Avery said, that I have deep respect for our staff, and they do not come to work thinking they're out to screw us. That's not what they do, okay? It's all about priority and saving money, and that's, I think, what was in their mind. So now if we shift gears a little bit, maybe we can offer a better solution. Thanks.
All right, I'll skip over here. Ms. Brenner.
I just wanted to say to Mr. Sullivan, if it were the right tree for the right spot, if we were starting in the very beginning, that would be different. But now we've got some of the wrong trees in spots that we love, and so we're having to work around that and try to maintain the history and the charm and the character of places that we love. And I just wanted to mention one thing. What I said earlier about, I liked Dennis Bress's term of life cycle management, because when I was talking before about Poppy Avenue, Dave, would you do you have those slides of what Poppy Avenue looks like now? We used to have beautiful eucalyptus trees on that street, and back in the 80s when we recommended some of them be taken out because they were dangerous, and they didn't, what happened was that it got to the point that it was so bad that we had to take all of those trees out, and our city staff worked so hard with the residents of Corona del Mar and Poppy in particular to come up with something that they could get behind, and that was before what they looked like. But our sidewalks were ramped, and we had little signs that say walk at your own risk, sort of, in the dark, but they were very dangerous. And so eventually we got to the point, because we weren't replacing them gradually, we got to the point that we had to take them all out, and this is what it looks like now. And we have beautiful straight sidewalks and straight streets, but we lost the charm that we had from those eucalyptus trees. So it's going to be beautiful when they grow up a little bit. We're not worried about that. But if we had gradually replaced those eucalyptus trees along the way to make sure that we always had healthy specimens, we might have been able to maintain that charm that we had on Poppy Avenue. And I also wanted to mention what Duffy referred to about the cost consideration by the staff. This council in particular has been pushing on staff for years now about watching the money. And so when they come up with a plan, I think they do often come up with what they're going to be able to do the most economically, and not consider perhaps the reaction of the community. So in this case, the process has worked. It's like everybody got involved, everybody became aware, and everybody let the staff and the council know that more money may need to be spent, but that we want that charm and that character maintained. And I would just like to applaud everyone who spoke today, because everyone was very concise and professional and articulate and respectful. And I know I've led movements like this before, and I always made a point of making sure to tell people you don't get people to do what you want by insulting them. So everyone was great today, and I know in times past I've always tried to be respectful, and I just wanted to apologize. I think one time I was rude to Duffy, and so I want to apologize if I was ever rude to you, Duffy. So, but I thought people today did a great job, and I really appreciate that. So, and I wanted to suggest that we make sure all the reports are submitted to PB&R. I would like to make sure that the PB&R Commission see all the reports that have been done by all the arborists, whoever they were authorized by, and that they be hopefully advised that we can do testing on certain trees if there's any question about trees that we might be able to save for a little bit longer. But I also hope to see that we have a healthy process of, and can we stop saying removing trees and start saying replacing trees? Just routinely don't say we're removing trees, we are replacing trees. And Ron Yo in Corona Del Mar has been our guardian of the trees. Ron Yo, every time a tree is taken out, he is on the staff like glue, making sure that a tree is replaced in a timely manner. And I think maybe that's something that the citizens can really be aware of and help us with, to make sure that if there are trees taken out. I know someone sent us an email that said there were trees that had not been replaced on Opal that were removed. So if we can make sure that we are really vigilant about getting those trees replaced. One little thing I'd like to tell you is when I was chair of the Parks Commission, there was a little 2-by-2-inch article in McCall's magazine that I tore out, and it said Tree City USA, and I gave it to one of my other commissioners, and I said, would you see if we can become a Tree City USA? And that was the beginning of our becoming part of the Arbor Day Society, and we are a tree city. We love our trees, and if we all work together, we can make sure that they are maintained and preserved, and that we are able to be proud of our community and the way it looks.
Thank you. Well said. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yep. So, so this morning we received a demand letter from attorneys representing the BIPA, and two of the 4 pages in there talked about the charter's requirement for the Parks, Beach, and Rec Commission, and also our council policies dealing with this. And the demand is that we follow the charter and the council policies, so let's do that. So it goes through the Parks, Beach, and Rec Commission. Even a moratorium needs to go through the Parks, Beach, and Rec Commission. That's their job, to make these recommendations to us. So send it to them and give the options. I mean, let them have options. If it's not just an option of which trees to be removed, 3 or the 10 as recommended, but give the option and the cost of what it would be to do a level 3 and see if they want to do that. And then give the option of a moratorium and see if they want to do that. But that's kind of the point of why we put these 7 folks on, is to make these decisions and recommendations. So, if that's the demand, let's do it.
Okay, well, let me bring this part of the day to conclusion, to sum up what my colleagues are saying and see if I can say this right. I think this has been a very healthy process, and I echo Councilmember Brenner's comments. This has been, but for the clapping, everything's been in order, and the clapping is not such a bad thing. So I want to thank on many levels that this, I often say this when I'm complimenting the community on their involvement and engagement and activism, that it takes a small group of loud voices to make public policy, and that's a good thing too. And our job, as Mayor Pro Tem just explained, that we have to weigh all these inputs and work and direct staff to help us all as a community do the right thing. I will say it's hard to think that anyone is divided on the question of should we protect and replace our trees. I mean, I think we are in violent agreement. We want to protect our community character. We want to protect all that makes us special. We want to protect our trees and replace those that need replaced. The question that we're coming down to today is how many trees are truly diseased or hazardous to our health, and let's turn it over to our Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission to work with staff. If cost is what is restrained looking to the level 3 testing, I think staff is hearing from us that let's do level 3 testing, for crying out loud. Let's not guess, let's be precise and use, as we've heard from the professionals several times this evening, that much science has progressed over the last 25 or 30 years, so we really can understand the kinds of situations, the predicament or the health of our trees. Let's make this standard for these special trees as are so designated in our council policy. Maybe we will at a future point revise or update our council policy that all special trees should go through an extreme vetting process just to make sure. And from a cost standpoint, and I too, as Mr. Duffield said, appreciate staff's consciousness about cost. Ironically, sometimes aggressive tree trimming and removal is costly too, and so let's kind of find a balance. I think the testing is the missing link in all of this, that we do one deeper level of testing. So just to repeat what's been said so staff is clear, let's find a middle ground. And I think, as we're all saying, there's somewhere between 3 and 10 or 3 and 27 over the next 5 years. What is the plan for assessing the health of these trees? And we know wherever, frankly, we are Tree City. When we all have been on the council and I'm participating in Arbor Day every April, and I learned that we are a tree city. So we have, what did you say, Mr. Picard? We have 30,000 trees, 37,000 trees?
35,000 trees.
35,000 trees in our city. We have a professional person, and we had, prior to that, we've always had a professional managing our tree process. So I don't know how many cities have a paid professional staff member managing our tree process. So I commend prior councils that we invest in the professional management of our trees. And as we went through this in our February study session, and maybe people were thinking, why are we spending 35 minutes on trees? But I'm glad we did, because that was the grounding, the foundation of why we care so much about our trees. And clearly our community cares. It's part of our character. It's part of our property values. We care. We're really talking about process and the speed of what we do. So let's find a middle ground. Let's do the extra testing. We have, in effect, a de facto moratorium, because PB&R is going to go through their analysis on September 3rd. It's going to come to the council. We are probably several months away from any tree disappearing off Marine Avenue. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, what? It doesn't guarantee.
PBR, go ahead. It wouldn't normally come back to council because you've delegated that task to PB&R, but if you'd like it to come back to council.
Well, let me just say that. Let's bring it back. Absolutely, frankly, I would like to. I think we all would like to know what the final resolution is, so we're all clearly on the same page. So have it bring back to council. So there'll be more public discussions of this. Consult with experts. I think it is a good idea to bring all these reports and to just weigh them all and give them equal weight in terms of their relevance in a particular area. And replace the trees when needed. We test with new technology, preserve absolutely whatever we can, test and save. PB&R's role, and I want to thank staff. I too commend staff. Doing the right thing is what they do well, and I appreciate that, and I hope that they haven't felt to be put in a defensive position too badly. You have to defend your professional expertise and acumen and giving recommendations to staff, and I appreciate you doing that. I want to thank the community for being here for 2 hours today, over 2 hours, to speak on a matter that's very, very important to all of us, and to realize we're all together on this subject. We all want to do the right thing. So without further comment, Mr. Muldoon, did you want one more comment?
Yeah, just quickly. So the citizens paid for the technology to be spent in every tree. Can that be considered when we do our analysis at PB&R and subsequently at council?
Yes, it can.
So we're saving the cost that we could normally spend because of citizens group. Thank you for your activism. And I appreciate, Mayor, what you said, which is that it's going to go through a public, slow process, and the residents will have a say.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Very much so. You are part of this process. So thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, let me find where we are. Yeah, well, I will. Please leave quietly, and we'll proceed to, okay, let me ask staff. Oh, welcome back. We're not done, ma'am. Not really. Could we exit quietly, please? We have another item on our agenda. Shh. Please, be quiet. Quiet. All right, quiet. Please, we're not adjourned. If you could please exit quietly, we're not adjourned. Ms. City Manager, we have a water rate presentation. Do we have enough time? Plus, we have a closed session agenda. So, well, all right. I just want to get her opinion. I know we do. So, how much time do you need?
So the presentation's about 20. I can try to have them squeeze it down to 15 minutes.
Okay, if we talk fast, okay?
Talk fast.
All right, let's go.
Okay.
All right, let me just introduce the item. It's the 2019 water rate study. The Utilities Department is leading the effort to review the rates associated with the Water Enterprise Fund. The previous water rate study was completed in 2009, and the last rate increase for water users was in 2014. The purpose of this presentation is to present a PowerPoint summary of the financial analysis, the draft water rates, receive input, and seek the City Council's direction to bring the item back for formal City Council agenda item. Again, this is a study session. We are not voting, and we'll be bringing this back possibly at a future meeting in September. All right, Mr. Pekoyevich.
All right, thank you, Mayor, council members. I want to introduce Sanjay Gar, who is our rate consultant from Rough Tellus, and then also Stefan Catron, who's our utilities manager. So we're going to get right into this and move along pretty quickly here. Some of the basic points, executive summary here too. We've had a lot of discussions about water over the last year, and here we are talking about, the costs of our water system have gone up. We haven't had a rate increase since 2014, so 5 years with no rate increases, and there's costs and expenses that need to be made up, and we are recommending a rate increase, and we'll go through that. The outline of the presentation is in the packet there for you as well, too. So like I said, we've been to council many times over the last 9 months. We've talked about the Water Master Plan. We've talked about the Water Rate Study. We've talked about, and we've also been to the Finance Committee, going over the financials and all of the different needs for the water system. You know the basics of our system, 300 miles of pipe, which if you just take a second to think about that, 300 miles of pipe, and of course 26,000 customers, it is kind of mind-blowing. The big decision that council made through our recommendation was our Water Master Plan, which increased capital expenditures by about $2.2 million annually in order to maintain the system adequately. And in the past, we've showed you pictures of failures and stuff. You remember the Jamboree water main break, and you've seen other pictures too. And when these systems fail, they cause a lot of damage and quite a big mess out there. And so pipes break no matter how well you plan for them, but it is our responsibility to plan as best we can for the replacement, for the operation and maintenance, and the financials of the system. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sanjay. Real quick, talk about customer service for our utility. We have 24/7, 24 hours a day. We have staff ready to respond. We are constantly monitoring our system, and of course, we provide all kinds of different services in terms of leak detection. This graphic up top, I think, kind of illustrates, kind of an important point. What can you get for a penny nowadays? Well, for a penny, you can get 2.5 gallons of water delivered, pressurized, clean to your house. And, it happens that way for a lot of different reasons, but the overarching thing is that the water utility operates as an enterprise fund. It's not a part of the general fund, but it's spent only for those purposes. The money received and the money spent is only for the purposes of water, and it has a whole separate and segregated accounting and financial reporting. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sanjay, who's going to jump into the financials.
Thank you, Mark. Honorary Mayor, City Council, staff, I'd like to present Raftelis' summary of his report. So a couple of backgrounds associated with the study. The last rate study that was occurred, or last, increase that occurred was in 2014. So no increases in rates have occurred over the last 5 years. Since then, the cost of purchasing water, you purchase water from two sources, Orange County and from Metropolitan Water District, has increased by 75%. In addition, in 2015, we had the state declaring a historical drought. Newport was successful in cutting back by 20%. And as Mark mentioned, we do have a new master plan study with an increase of 2.2 annual increase to $7.2 million. So the goals and objectives of the study are threefold. First is a financial plan to look at all the various cost components associated with it, which we took into account. The second is to develop a reserve policy that takes into account future risk specifically associated with drought condition. And the last thing is to enhance revenue stability, while at the same time, this is the balancing act, meaning affordability and community communication associated with conservation signaling. With the reserve policies, we did a comprehensive review. We discussed this with staff and the Finance Committee. What we're recommending is threefold reserves. One is an operating reserve for cash flow needs. Second is a capital reserve for awarding contracts and to also have opportunities where there might be a situation where Mark can get a better bid by doing certain things, such as a street being repaired. He can go in there, fix it. There's opportunities there, so it creates flexibility in the system. The third is a rate stabilization fund to deal with drought conditions. We do take into account the cost of purchasing water, the avoided cost. Basically, we're suggesting something to deal with the next drought. Hopefully it doesn't occur, but if it does, we'll have that. So this is a summary of the table associated with the reserve policies. The first two columns is your current policy. The second two columns is our proposed, and the bottom line is the target. As you can see, we are slightly increasing the reserve policy by a slight amount. The next...
Can I just ask you to just explain, just for the public record, that why we need a reserve what happens when there is a drought and less water is consumed?
Correct. So there's a conception there that you do pay for the purchase of water, right? But there is also additional cost. This is that hidden cost that Mark discussed, which is the ability to use water 24/7, 7 days a week. And that's a fixed cost nature associated with it. So as people use less water, that cost is still there. And the idea of a rate stabilization fund is to draw that down during those conditions. So we don't have to tell our customers, please conserve, and we're sorry, we have to increase your rates. We don't want to have that mixed message. So it's basically almost like insurance in the sense of dealing with a drought in the future.
Okay, good. Thank you.
The next now, based on all this information, we've developed a financial model, and this is basically shows the ending fund balance. The blue bars are the ending fund balances and what we're estimating to be in the future. The red line is the reserve target that I just mentioned. And as you can see, in fiscal year 2020, we're below the target, and then by fiscal year 2024, we're negative. So some kind of revenue adjustment, increases in rates is needed. Based on dialogue, discussion with staff, Finance Committee, and some stakeholders, what we're recommending is a 7.4% increase over the next 5 years. The first year, that would be basically for the average customer is $3.38 a month. Note one thing here is that blue bars, we're drawing down on reserves. So this is a plan on drawing reserves down. We're not building up reserves. The reserve policy is higher, but we are drawing down on reserves in order to meet our goals. So now the increase. So what we've done is we have slightly increased the fixed charge. Currently, you collect around 31% of your revenue comes from the fixed charge. We're slightly increasing that to 34%. Remember what I said earlier about that goal, the third objective, enhance revenue stability while maintaining affordability and conservation. So we're doing that by having a slight increase in the fixed charge. That also helps with future drought conditions. Ideally, we would increase that all the way, but if we did that, that would be a 25% increase on the fixed charge, and it wouldn't meet those objectives. Over here, you can see the different increases associated with different usage.
So just for people just seeing this, so the typical consumer is there on the left column.
Correct, 10 units.
And then commercial have a lot bigger pipes, so there's obviously a greater cost. So just to be clear.
The next chart then basically shows the new fixed charge. As I mentioned, this fixed charge is slightly increasing more proportional than the volumetric in the first year. You see the different fixed charges. We are standardizing. One of the things with water rates now is making sure there's a document that shows the math, the rationality for everything. That's something that we'll be providing next in our study. We call it administrative record, sorry for the jargon terminology, but it shows the math. And one of the things we want to do is we want to be sure we're consistent with industry standards. So we're doing that with the meter charge. So that's why some of the meter rates, as you'll notice, the impact, they sort of vary by meter size, because we're making it consistent now with the standards associated with the meter size and their capacity. This next shows the volumetric rate. So that does slightly increase. And now the next slide shows the proposed rates. And so this would be in your Prop 218 notice where we're showing the rate schedule. We are asking City Council to consider, not today, but in the future, to consider adopting 5 years of rates. And so this will be set for the next 5 years, and then it'll be to 2024. This is the commodity rate associated with that. Next, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Okay, thank you, Sanjay. And so, setting rates are a very public process, and we are going to start engaging that public process here too. The first being having this information, which has already been posted up front as of last week, and we're going to have additional information going out to the public. And there's an important decision point we're planning for on September 10th, which is in the actual rate study report, and if City Council would authorize us to continue with that, which would be mailing a direct notice to every single customer, every single of our 26,000 customers, a notice to them about the rates, and then continue with our public information and outreach to our utility bills and community meetings too. Frankly, we do a lot of community meetings and getting out there and talking to people about this. And council would be asked to set a public hearing date for the future in November too, as well. And if this moves forward, it would set the rates to begin in January. There's additional slides backing up there too that have the fees for fire connection fees, fire meters, also our recycled water system as well are all in there. All of those are in your packet, but for brevity, I'm just going to conclude the presentation there and answer any questions.
Can I just ask a quick question on you just bring up recycled. Some residents are asking about the city's recycled water policy or master plan, or could you speak real quickly on what we intend to do about that?
Sure. So we do have a small portfolio in the recycled water system too. We're always looking for ways where we can expand that, and in fact we have projects on the books where we're going to be connecting some additional streets and things like that, street medians in particular. But expanding the system really requires, some sort of, master plan to kind of look at it holistically. We have a lot of studies that we've done over the years, and frankly, it's a big investment to build the infrastructure for the pipes and pumps to get to these areas that need to use large amounts of water. We're happy to look at that after this study's done and maybe come together with some sort of short master plan that looks at that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to point something out to my colleagues. Could you go back to, I think it's the slide that's titled Status Quo Financial Plan Fund Balance? Yeah, that one. So I just want to point this out real quickly for my colleagues. What this is saying is if we don't increase rates, we will go into a deficit. And we've had this conversation, or the council's had this conversation before dealing with the wastewater. So I just want to point out that enterprise funds, this is more for the public, enterprise funds are about as close to running government like a business as you can get. The only difference is it's a monopoly and you can't make a profit. So in this particular case, we can't charge more than we take in, and we can't take in more than we spend. I should probably rephrase that. And so the important thing is, as we've gone through and seen this, when you don't have rate increases for 5 years, you have to increase the rates more than you would have had we done this 5 years ago. And so that's part of the equation. But most importantly, the expenses have dramatically gone up in terms of the cost of water. And also when we approved the water master plan, which was necessary, we saw construction costs going significantly up. So we've seen costs going up, which is why we have to match that on the fee side. But I just wanted to point this out. Thank you.
Very good. Are there any other questions up here? Seeing none, why don't we go to the public? Please come forward.
Tim Stokes, I just wanted a question of what percentage of the city is serviced by Newport Beach Water? I know I'm not. I'm on IRWD. And then also, is that rate compatible with an IRWD rate? Is it market value?
That's a very good question. Let me ask Mark, please, to respond.
Sure. Our service area for Newport Beach water is about 70% of the city's geographic limits. The proposed rates are still very competitive with our neighbors. And Sanjay, who's done lots of presentations about rates and rate structures, can speak further about any of those details. Every system's a little bit different. For example, like Irvine Ranch has a property tax component to theirs. Ours does not. Some charge for capital, some don't. Some have a pass-through where they put it in for the actual cost of water. And so there's different versions of this and rates. Ours is very simple and straightforward, but it is very competitive with our neighbors.
Sanjay, did you want to make any other comment?
Yeah, the only one thing I would like to say is that to make this apple to apple, just imagine that $7.2 million that we're funding annually was taken off the table and was put on the property roll. That would be the way to look at us versus Irvine. So that's what Irvine does.
And then you pay it through your property tax.
Yeah. Your rates only pay for operating costs at Irvine Ranch.
Oh.
So that's the way to look at it.
Oh, that's interesting. Mr. Mosher.
Mayor Dixon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosher. I sat through those two finance committee meetings struggling to try to understand what was being presented, which rapidly became very, very complicated. We heard about this reserves, risks, trying to anticipate unknown amounts of demand that we might have for water in the future, and the risk that if the demand for water went down, we would have to tell people that they're going to have to pay even more to keep the pipes running. After sitting through those and not quite understanding what the presentation was about, it occurred to me, or it seemed to me, to my simple mind, that much of this complication, which you didn't hear much about today, is kind of self-created in the sense that some past council has made a conscious decision to undercharge for the infrastructure needs, the cost. To my simple mind, the water system has kind of a fixed standby cost to keep the pipes maintained, even if there was no water being taken out of the system, keep the pumps operable and so forth. And then there's a variable cost as water is drawn out of it, which should be pretty much proportional to the number of gallons that are dispensed. It has to do with the cost of buying water, has to do with operating the pumps, has to do with chemicals and so forth. Why, as a baseline, don't we actually just charge the total fixed cost that we need to our customers, bite the bullet, do that once, and then actually charge the correct cost for the water that we're receiving? And the state law now, as we heard, actually allows us to pass through the cost. In that case, when the consumption goes up and down, we're not in this bind. Do we have enough reserve? Are we at the right percent? So forth. So to my simple mind, I'm wondering why we don't start that as the baseline that we consider and then ask ourselves, why are we doing something different than that? Which gets us into all these complications and uncertainties as to how the future is going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that? That's a good question.
Do you mind if we bring it back? Because I want to respond to it too.
You can wait. Well, let me ask staff respond, then you can respond. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. So that.
You can be beautiful each day. See the world in your own way. It's your song. Just sing along.
Hey, let me get myself organized. Okay, we're round two here. Call the meeting to order for the August 13th regular session of the Newport Beach City Council. Get my right glasses on here. Madam Clerk, roll call.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Current business, so we'll clarify, wait a minute, am I on the right page here? Hold on. I know I'm going to get to, I'm still in the study session here. All right, is there a closed session report, Mr. City Attorney?
Thank you, Mayor Dixon. We do have a report this evening. In regards to the case entitled Robert Martin versus City of Boise, which is listed on the agenda as item number 4B, a motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem O'Neill and seconded by Councilmember Brenner to join the litigation as amicus. The motion was unanimously approved by the City Council. Robert Martin is the lead plaintiff in this case, and the other plaintiffs include Lawrence Smith, Robert Anderson, Janet Bell, Pamela Hawks, and Basil Humphrey. The City of Boise is the only defendant. And this lawsuit primarily relates to camping on public property and the enforcement of anti-camping ordinances. The City of Boise is seeking review of the Ninth Circuit's decision before the United States Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to announce that we have the invocation by Pastor Jorge Molina, Mariners Church in Irvine, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Muldoon. Please.
Dear God, thank you so much, Father, for today. Thank you for this opportunity that we have to gather here. I pray, Father, for wisdom for our leaders and discernment. Thank you for the opportunity we have to gather and hear what you are doing in this wonderful town, Lord. Pray, Father, for your blessing on those that are here. Amen.
Join me in the pledge. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk.
The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the city council. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium. The City Council of Newport Beach welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has a discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones off or set them in the silent mode.
Now is the time for City Council announcements, new items council members would like to be introduced for future agendas, and oral reports from City Council on committee activities. Mr. Avery.
I attended one meeting about a week ago of the Orange County Sanitation District, and other than that, I have no other comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duffield.
Same with me. It's been very quiet, although we did work a little bit on our dredging project. With a good meeting, keep forging ahead with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Keep up that good work. Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you. I will be attending the anniversary of the Korean and World War II veterans at, drawing a blank here.
American Legion.
Thank you, the American Legion. I don't know why. It's such an easy name to remember. It's going to be an honor. I'll be presenting a proclamation on behalf of Mayor Dixon, and for myself, it's a great privilege because my grandfather served in Korea and World War II.
Oh, wonderful. Ms. Brenner.
Yes, my homeless task force subcommittee work is on education and public outreach, and I serve on that with Jean Wagoner from SPIN. I think we have a slide showing from SPIN, and we've been meeting at the SPIN offices along with Terry Moore from Trellis. And these people both have a lot of extensive experience in working with the homeless, and they've been just enlightening to me on this. I also attended a ad hoc committee meeting on short-term lodging with Mayor Dixon and Councilman Herdman. I met with my new mentee, Vanessa Conejo from Newport Harbor High School. I'm excited about that. And I spoke with former Mayor Evelyn Hart about the possible plans to add an exercise pool at Oasis. Terry Moore from Trellis and Homeless Task Force Subcommittee member and I toured the Melinda Hoag Smith Center for Healthy Living. And we've got some slides. I don't know if I even sent those slides to you. I think I forgot. So we don't have any slides, but we toured the Melinda Hoag Center, and we were so impressed with everything that they offer there. And it is subsidized by the hospital and the Hoag Foundation, and they are partners with a great many nonprofits who have a presence there, and the work they do is just amazing. I was especially impressed by the mental health facilities that they have there, and talked with Hoag staff members about the diversity of the mental health patients that they have there. People that they say we would never suspect, that don't have the ability to have mental health insurance or whatever, and can come there and get mental health services. It's a really amazing place. I also attended a monthly meeting with the Corona del Mar Residents Association Executive Committee. I filmed a tour of the new Corona del Mar Branch Library for Newport Beach TV with the head librarian, Anika Helmuth. I met with Grace, Dave Webb, and traffic engineer Tony Brine and others to discuss ways that we can make sure traffic is a major consideration in our planning. I had originally proposed that we have a traffic affairs commission, and we're looking at ways that we can save staff time but still accomplish the same goal of having traffic be a major consideration in everything that we do. I attended the Costa Mesa Network for Homeless Solutions, which was a group of about 12 people that met at the Costa Mesa City Hall. This is 12 of about 24 people that work on the homeless issue in Costa Mesa. These were the most welcoming people. They were so eager to share everything that they've already been doing in the area of homelessness, because they were part of a lawsuit. They are ahead of us. We were not in that lawsuit, so they are ahead of us in developing a lot of strategies in dealing with the homeless, and they are more than eager to share all of that information with us. It was a fascinating meeting. Will, Diane, and I met with Mike Sinacori, Dave Webb, and the BII leadership and several Southern California Edison executive team members. It was our second meeting for them to come back and answer questions that we had posed in our first meeting, looking for any ways that we could get help with undergrounding assistance. And we came up with every creative idea we could think of, and they came back with every reason why they couldn't do it. And it was very disappointing, but we're trying. We're still trying. So that was an interesting meeting. That's it.
Okay, Mr. Herdman.
I, too, will be attending that Veterans Luncheon along with you, Councilman Muldoon, so I will see you there. I'm not sure who else is going.
I never got an invitation.
You didn't?
No.
Come as my guest. All right. Along with Mayor Pro Tem and Councilwoman Brenner, I attended the Newport Beach Police Department Summer Teen Academy graduation. I served as a judge at the annual Balboa Island Sandcastle contest a couple of Saturdays ago. I would say the last 2 weeks I've spent most of my time in conversations with people about the homeless issue in our city, and I've spent a great deal of time answering email about the Marine Avenue Rehabilitation Project. That's taken up hundreds of hours over the last couple of weeks. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I got to spend a lot of time with our police department. We had the Newport Beach Police Department Night Out, which was really well attended, especially by families. So I appreciate the efforts of all of our police department to make that work, especially the top brass who all were there. So thank you, Chief Lewis. And then I also attended the Newport Beach Teen Academy with council members Brenner and Herdman, and was able to speak just a little bit. And it's really one of those things you get to enjoy looking at teenagers in our community who are getting out and caring about community service. So that's special. Office hours, man, I'm getting 6 to 7 people at my office hours. So I just want, yeah, I know. So I'm going
to find the chairs?
I'll advertise. We did this time, yeah. So I'm going to advertise about 3 or 4 weeks ahead. November 11th, 8 to 10 a.m. I'm sorry, I said November. I meant September. September 11th, 8 to 10 a.m. at the Newport Coast Community Center. If you've never been there, which a surprisingly high number of people in Newport Beach have not, this is a great opportunity to come see the building. And then the last thing is TCA board meeting. I attended on behalf of Newport Beach. There's a lot going on with the Foothill Eastern, not a substantial amount with San Joaquin, but I am planning on trying to spearhead an effort to create finance policies. Interestingly enough, they don't have them. So I'm going to be talking with past Mayor Rush Hill and trying to work that through. And then is my mentee here, Timothy? Yep. So got my mentee from Newport Harbor High School here. So thank you for being here. And that's it.
Well, thank you, and I have a few announcements, and I'm missing one piece of paper, so I'll just have to get through what I have here. First of all, I want to congratulate our library. The California State Library has selected Newport Beach as the California History Section City of the Month. This distinction highlights organizations involved in local cultural preservation and outreach, as well as the varied local history resources available to researchers at the State Library. And this is really what's really special. The California History section of our library holds a premier collection of documents from and about California's rich history, as well as the city's history. And their vaults house thousands of rare books, maps, and newspapers, periodicals, in addition to a huge collection of unique photographs and letters. And in last July, in an effort to better support the work of local governments and historical societies in promoting and preserving the past, the California History Section started the City of the Month program as a companion to their County of the Month program. And so Newport Beach Central Library has been recognized. And we also, just to the local history collection at the Central Library, it is unique, comprised of rare documents relating to the city of Newport Beach. All of you, I know, are excited, as we all are. The next concert on the green is Queen Nation, so I expect to see all of us there dancing our hearts out. August 25th at 5 p.m. on the Civic Green, right out here, in a tribute to one of the most iconic groups in rock history, Queen Nation recreates the image, sound, and energy of a live Queen concert. And so we will rock you, Bohemian Rhapsody. If you saw the movie, you know what that's about, and we are the champions, so it's really going to be a fun evening. Visitors are encouraged to bring their beach chairs and blankets for an evening of fun. College application workshop in the Friends Meeting Room, August 31st at 10 a.m. to 11:30. The library is hosting a workshop to help high school students access the Common Application, the UC app, Coalition, or any other app to assist students to submit the best college applications possible. I'm holding up this, I don't know, I think there's a slide on this about Earth Day messages. Do we have a slide on this? It's coming now. Okay, this is really exciting. A few months ago, you might remember that we had a mayor's contest this past Earth Day for water conservation, and it was a national contest. And so our city's Recreation and Senior Services Department asked their preschool and after-school students, thank you, to create postcards that Councilmember Herdman is going to show up right now with messages about what they would like to protect. Oh, here they are right here on the screen, to protect planet Earth and why. Approximately 100 cards with handwritten messages and unique artwork were completed, bundled, and sent to my office. And here are a few colorful covers. Some of the messages included: I will water plants and pick up every trash on the floor. I will use less water and pick up trash. I will take care of Earth because we all need it later. It is also beautiful, and we need it to stay that way. This is a wonderful example of educating our youth early on the importance of protecting our environment and resources for the future. It was really, really fun, and I'm really proud of that. I think when Mayor Gardner was mayor, you did the same thing, because I saw in the files letters to Mayor Gardner. You started a great tradition. Okay, and then I think there's another slide. If all of you, do you have, who's doing the slides? On the New York Times, I don't know how many of you woke up Sunday and opened the travel section of the New York Times and didn't know where to travel, and you could travel right here to Newport Beach. They did a wonderful profile where Hollywood's golden age stars found safe harbor, from Humphrey Bogart and his friends. They even talk about Duffy's. I hope you saw the article. Did you see it? And so I immediately sent the clip of it to Grace and to Gary Sherwin. And Gary wrote me back. I don't know if Gary's here tonight, but Gary, I visit Newport Beach, and Gary wrote me back and said that they orchestrated the whole public relations, media relations effort, and the reporter was here visiting Newport Beach in June or July and had been working on this story. So that was great public relations for the city, and I'm very proud of that. I think that's it on my announcement. Mr. Herdman, you wanted to agendize a future item proposal?
Yes, I noticed there's an entire front row of Fawn Bass people here, so if I'm superseding you, we've had a request from Fawn Bass who would like to insert membership applications in the return dog license envelope. So I guess that requires City Council approval, so I'm requesting that be a future agenda item.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you very much. Let me just get here. All right, do we have public comments on any of these items that the council members just brought forward? Did you want to say something, Mr. Stokes? Sure, go right ahead.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tim Stokes. I represent President of the Friends of Newport Beach Animal Shelter. Last year at this time, I reported some activities that Von Boss was doing, and I want to kind of remind everybody our mission is to provide funding for extra medical care, specialized equipment, vocational education, and our aspirational goal is to find a forever home for our shelter. That means we're potentially purchasing the shelter. This year, I'd like to say we're about ready to do that. So we have a site in mind. We're negotiating for that site. We're also started our pre-capital campaign funding, so we have the majority of our funds in place before we start the public side of our capital campaign. So we look forward to working with Carol Jacobs and the rest of the staff of getting this with the chief and Valerie Schomburg, the animal control that we work with at the facility. So the public-private partnership is live and well in Newport Beach. So public citizens can help out our city with these great resources called extra facilities and those types of things. So I'm very proud of that. I'd like to introduce some of my board here tonight. Eva LeBon, Evelyn Hart, Jean Watt, Nancy Gardner, and Robin Grant. You see, I'm on that couch that says outnumbered. That's me. Okay, I don't know what program that's on. So simple that. The other thing we have started this year, not only that, but we did set our sights into getting members for our organization. So we're calling that the Founding Membership Campaign. And we came out with these beautiful categories such as puppies and kitties, tails, whiskers, paws, fat cats, and big dogs. You just have to give us a nice little donation and you can become one of those categories. And as the president of all the unconditional four-legged animals in the city of Newport Beach, Mayor Dixon, you sent me a beautiful check, or sent our organization a beautiful check. So I'm deeming you the #1 founding member for our organization. So congratulations.
Oh, I'm honored. Anything for our four-legged friends. There you go. Thank you. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm proud. I will wear it with pride. And thank you. I mean, let me just give you a commercial because all of you started about 3 or 4 years ago, and you've been passionate about finding our city's very own animal shelter. We've done it efficiently and economically, and because of your excellent work, you have found a very generous donor who's going to make this next chapter possible. And the public-private process works. And
it does.
I'm
it
very
does.
grateful.
And we could use some more capital campaign donations. So
more private. You want
more private, and then I encourage everybody to become a member, and you get one
Absolutely.
of those.
I vouch for it. It's a great organization.
Thank
Friends of Newport Beach Animal Shelter.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, ladies of the boards. Thank you. Okay, any other public comments? Please come forward. Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
This is a time in which council members may pull items from the consent calendar for discussion. Those are items 1 through 14. Public comments are also invited on consent calendar items. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. If any item is removed from the consent calendar by a council member, members of the public are invited to speak on each item for up to 3 minutes per item. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the City Council votes on the motion unless members of the City Council request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent calendar for separate action.
Thank you. Mr. Avery, do you have any items to pull from the consent item? Mr. Duffield? Mr. Muldoon?
I have none, but I have a recusal on 2 items, both due to real property interest. Although I think they're both out of the exact 500-yard or 500 feet restriction, just to be safe. I'm going to recuse myself on item number 7 for real property interest and on item number 14 for the same.
Ms. Brenner? Mr. Herdman?
I have none.
Mayor Pro Tem?
None.
And I will be pulling item number 12. Do we have a motion?
So I move the balance the consent calendar with item number 1 showing modifications of the minutes, item number 3 with the modifications in the that was provided to us in our yellow packet, item 11 same thing, and then the items 7 and 14 showing Councilmember Muldoon recusal, and item number 12 being pulled by by Mayor Dixon.
I'll second the motion.
Very good. Any public comments on the consent calendar on all items except for number 12? Please come forward.
Okay.
All right. Oh, here we go.
Good evening. My name is Ruth Sanchez Kobayashi. Thank you all for the service to our community. First, I'd like to thank you for joining in the brief for Martin versus Boise. It demonstrates a commitment to not only helping the people in need in our community, but also preserving the quality of life for everyone. I communicated to you via email on that and the following 2 things, but I just wanted to also mention to you on item number 14 on the grant approvals, that serious consideration be given to grant approvals for organizations where 75% of the people served are non-residents, and bringing at-risk people to within 100 feet of 2 of our schools is just a cautionary tale, as always looking out for the safety of our students above everything else. And then item number 17 on the Vivante project, which I'm completely agnostic on, but just on the construction traffic. As we live really close to where that intersection is.
Mrs. Kobayashi,
Yeah.
item 17, is public hearing.
Yeah. Okay, I thought it was on the consent calendar. You should have stopped me
Actually,
earlier.
item 16.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
I was looking to see where it is, and thank you. All right, thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor Dixon. My name is Wendy Weeks, and I'm the Executive Director for Youth Employment Service in Costa Mesa. I'm speaking on behalf of item number 14 for the funding, and I just wanted to go ahead and say a quick little bit about what Youth Employment Service does and how long we've been in the area. So, looking for your consideration for continued funding. We at Youth Employment Service have been around for almost 50 years as of next April, and we're excited to say that we have continued to grow our organization and the number served through the past 5 years. And excited to also notice that we have continued to also serve even though it's still a smaller amount of Newport Beach clients and 16 to 24-year-olds, we do continue to grow in that area, and also working with even more of our employers in the area. What our organization does is we help 16 to 24-year-olds become employment ready by putting them through workshops and mock interviews so that they can become those that are actual reasonable, responsible employees for our upcoming workforce, and really appreciate any funding that you could continue to provide to our little organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we'll come back. Any council comments? Seeing none, let's have a motion. We have a motion to approve and a second. Who was the original motion? Mr. O'Neill, followed by?
Councilmember Herdman.
Herdman.
Second.
Okay, let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
All right, since I was the one who pulled item number 12, the replacement of the outdoor warning system, I'll ask staff to come forward to explain that. I don't know if we have any members of the community who have been watching for this item for a while. There you are, Mr. Ozunian. Okay, this is for you. We have Katie Ng here, our emergency services manager. And would you please explain what we are doing, because this is really exciting for our public safety.
Good evening, council members and Mayor Dixon. Tonight, what we have before you is to discuss the replacement of our outdoor warning system. If you remember back to 2010, due to a couple tsunami warnings and tsunami events that went on in the city and as well as around the world, the council at that time made the decision to put in an outdoor notification system to alert residents in the low-lying areas of tsunamis, or really it could be any type of disaster or emergency. So that was in 2010. Fast forward to now. Last year we did a full test on those outdoor warning sirens, and what we discovered, there's 3 of them. The 3 sirens are in West Newport, at Marina Park, and at the Wedge. What we discovered during that full power test is that they are not working properly. So what we did is we hired an acoustic specialist to come out to tell us what was going on as far as could residents hear the sirens, what was the distance, that type of thing. We discovered that 2 of the sirens were not functioning properly. The 3rd was. So what we did was go back to our original vendor, American Signal, had them come out, do an assessment of the sirens, and discuss if they could be replaced, upgraded, that type of thing. As you know, in the coastal environment, things tend to rust. So we purchased a system back in 2010 with mechanical parts, and those are expensive to replace. And what we found looking around is it was more cost-effective and using current technologies and future technologies to look at other vendors. What you have before you tonight is a purchase from the LRAD system, Long Range Acoustic Device Corporation. That is the company that Laguna Beach and several other of our Orange County partners have purchased systems from. And we have before you to replace the 3 existing sirens with the LRAD system.
Is there any photo to illustrate that? No? That's okay. I just didn't know if there was. All right, do we have any questions? No? Let me just say thank you for following up on this. I know this is something that you've been working on for quite some time, and it is important to the peninsula and peninsula residents. So thank you very much. Are there any public comments? Please come forward.
Brian Ozonian, 45-year peninsula resident in Balboa. So for the whole length of time I've lived on Balboa Peninsula, I've never heard the siren at all. At all. If it happened that we had a tsunami, I couldn't hear it, even during the tests. On all the tests that were done, I went all around the property, couldn't hear a thing. This is at where the boardwalk ends, at E Street and Balboa Boulevard. So my suggestion is not to trust the consultant, that you have a provision in however you move, that if it's still deficient, more towers be erected and installed. Because if we don't all hear it, it's not fair. We all have to hear it. So I can't hear the one at Marina Park. I can't hear the one at the Wedge. Maybe the people in Corona Del Mar can hear it, but I can't hear it. Never heard it. So the other comment I'll make about the corrosiveness, well, gee, we live in a corrosive environment. That should have been completely addressed in the beginning of the specifications. So not to go backwards, but looking forward, I just hope that we hear it. And how you notify the public through Nixle, or this last one was supposed to be a full volume test, if I'm correct. And I was hopeful I'd hear one and didn't hear any. So, but maybe because 2 of them were out. Was the West Newport functioning?
No, not during the fully functional test, it was not.
Which one was?
At the Wedge.
Yeah, well, I didn't hear it at all. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think we will hear it. And so when will it be installed and operable? Jonathan, thank you to be here also.
You're welcome, Mayor Dixon.
So the timeline we've received from the equipment provider, LRAD, is 12 to 16 weeks after they receive the purchase order, and that puts us sometime start time right after Thanksgiving and finished before Christmas.
Very good. All right. Well,
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
if anyone's in Hilo, go to the tsunami warning system in Hilo. It's in the old bank building. The video is actually in the vault. It is unbelievable how we are in the ring of fire. If you don't know what the ring of fire is, they'll sure explain it. We had one in Indonesia. We got events in Alaska and South America. So that is the ring of fire. And so I think we're kind of on borrowed time.
Well, we're going to have the best technology to keep us informed, so thank you for your input. Any other public comments on this item? I'll bring it back up here. Mr. Avery.
I assume the company plans these things out. They know where they can reach, and they've got it figured out.
Yes, Mr. Avery, we have sound projections produced by LRAD that show not only the siren pattern, depending on the tone that we use, but also clear voice technology that they use, so we can use for announcements. We do have that information, and the projections are very adequate for our needs for now.
And we would have to sign off at the end of this, or be a trial.
Yes,
obviously.
not only the installation, but we will test them in situ.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, so the two things that gave me pause on this one, the first one was the fact that a tsunami warning device we were using was not compatible with a coastal environment. So I'm glad that we are going to have a tsunami warning device that will be compatible with a coastal environment. The second is, have we given thought to testing more often at full blast? I know that it's probably not ideal for our residents by any stretch, but it's a whole lot worse to find out that it doesn't work.
Yes, our plan is to test them at full power once a month.
That's what we did before, didn't we? Haven't we always been doing that?
We tested them once a month at test power, and these are mechanical sirens, and they would power up at about 10%. And then it will report back electronically that the test was successful. In other words, they powered up to 10%. That's why Mr. Ozunian never heard them. They're not meant to be heard. They're meant to just make sure that the impeller would turn and the rotational motor would work. But that was test mode. So we won't be using test mode anymore. We will test at full power once a month.
Very good. Ms. Brenner.
Grace, I had a question. Could this be considered a meeting of our emergency council for FEMA purposes to check it off on the list?
No, that doesn't, but we will, we do have that scheduled to come up in this fall, so
Okay.
we'll be back.
Any other questions? All right. Do we have a motion to approve this item, the replacement of the outdoor warning system?
I motion approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Avery, second by Mayor Pro Tem. Let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 7-0.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Please come forward. Any others? Just start to line up if there are any.
Mayor Dixon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. Regarding your decision to join the lawsuit or petition for a lawsuit about the City of Boise matter, I forgot to make this part of my comment earlier because you were in a hurry and very late. But I was trying to look on our city website because I am sure we had engaged Mr. Ted Olson before in some kind of legal work. And I noticed that the contracts, many contracts that the city signs for outside legal services do not seem to be in the city clerk's database. And I think that's an oversight because our charter requires all contracts to be there. It makes no exception for legal work. The public should know who we contract with. And I think that could be easily corrected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Members of the council, Mayor Dixon, my name is Arthur Peskin. I'm a lifelong resident of Newport Beach. I graduated from Corona Del Mar High School as a member of the Youth Council, and I love this city. People want to live, work, and play in Newport Beach. But why? It's something more profound than just our beautiful beaches, great people, great shopping and culture. People want to live the Newport lifestyle. And we should all be very proud of that fact in this room today, because based on the hard work, day in and day out, of not only all of you sitting up there right now, but everyone in this room. However, with that success comes immense challenges. And first and foremost is the continued growth of this city. Businesses, companies, corporations want to relocate to Newport Beach. People want to continue to move here, and tourists want to continue to visit our city. It is up to us to ensure that we grow responsibly. And my associates and I have 2 words for you as a solution: monorail. Newport Beach has an opportunity here to embrace the 21st century with one of the pinnacles of 21st century public transit technology. Now, I commend the City Council and the city for their actions in creating the Balboa Peninsula Trolley, a form of public transit that is free and that allows tourists and residents of Newport to enjoy the coastal areas of our city. But that simply isn't enough. The city suffers from a congestion problem. Residents can't even get down to the peninsula or anywhere near the harbor on a weekend, especially during the summer. And the problem is only going to continue to get worse. But why is a monorail the solution? Let me explain. A monorail is a clean, efficient, and quiet system for public transit. It can be built using existing medians on major thoroughfares, and it minimizes any risk of eminent domain in the city. We propose a 5-line, 47-station plan for a monorail in the city of Newport Beach, connecting neighborhoods as diverse as Newport Coast, Balboa Island, Westcliff, Newport North, and Fashion Island, with a central station centered right here at the Civic Center. It would have weekday operating hours from 6 a.m. to midnight in order to ensure that those that work in Newport Beach can get around. And on the weekends, it would be extended to 2 a.m. to make sure that people can enjoy the nightlife and culture of this city in a safe and responsible manner that doesn't force them to drive cars and risk the risk of driving drunk, which I think we'd all agree is a major problem in this city. Now, we are asking you to really embrace a dynamic, ground-changing, groundbreaking idea for the city of Newport Beach. And I ask you to seriously consider this to make Newport Beach a beacon of the 21st century in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank
At
you.
this time, I would like to pass out pamphlets that we provided with information.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Do we have any other public comments on non-agenda items? Please come forward. Seeing none? All right, let's get to business here. Public hearing, the first item, number 15, the Mesa Drive Townhomes Call for Review. And we will be considering a resolution to uphold the Planning Commission's approval of major site development for this 8-unit residential condominium project located at 1501 Mesa Drive and 2462 Santa Ana Avenue. So, Mr. Jurgis, you'd like to tell us what's going on?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council members. Simone Jurgis, I'm your Community Development Director. With me, I have Jim Campbell, who's our Deputy Director, and Liz Westmoreland, who is our Associate Planner. The item for this evening is an 8-unit townhome project located at 1501 Mesa Drive and off Santa Ana Avenue. This application was presented to the Planning Commission back in April, and the Planning Commission did approve the application. There were some community members that had some questions or concerns about compatibility and traffic. Mayor Dixon, you've asked for a call for review for the item. We believe that we have a presentation that will answer the compatibility issues and the traffic issues. So we have a short presentation for you, about 10 slides that we'd like to go through.
Okay, please proceed. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. I'm Liz Westmoreland with the Planning Division. This application is a call for review for a project that was approved by the Planning Commission back in March of this year. The project includes demolition of 2 existing single-family residences and the construction of 8 new condominium units. A site development review is required to implement the approved tentative tract map. The project is located in the West Santa Ana Heights area at the corner of Santa Ana Avenue and Mesa Drive. It's bordered by the city of Costa Mesa, the county of Orange, or the Santa Ana Country Club, as well as the Santa Ana Heights Specific Plan multifamily area. To provide a brief overview of the layout, there's one central driveway that goes between the two buildings for the project. Each building contains 4 dwelling units, each containing a 2-car garage. There are 4 guest parking spaces at the rear, as well as areas to turn around. The project complies with all development standards and no deviations are being requested. This rendering provides a view from Mesa Drive, which is the main or the longest frontage for the project. The applicant has provided substantial architectural treatment as well as building articulation and will utilize high-quality, durable materials. As you can see, the first floor is actually set down below the existing grade of the sidewalk. So although the project contains 4 stories, it does meet the maximum height limitation of 33 feet for the RMD zone. This view of the project is from Santa Ana Avenue. You can see the driveway that leads to the site from Santa Ana Avenue. The applicant has provided additional setbacks for the top story there on the interior and the exterior to provide some additional visual relief. This is not required by code, but the applicant has provided it. Additionally, the project will be set back 20 feet from the street or the front property line, and all existing hedges, walls, etc. that currently impede visibility of the intersection will be removed. Additionally, there are currently 3 driveways located on the site to access the site, and these would be consolidated into one. They will allow all vehicles to enter and exit the site facing forward, where currently individuals actually have to back out onto the street in order to leave the site. There were a few concerns that came up as part of the previous project review. These related mainly to traffic and intersection concerns, density concerns that were more recently brought up, and neighborhood compatibility. First, in terms of traffic and intersection concerns, this project would result in a net increase of 6 dwelling units, which equates to about 40 additional vehicle trips a day. This is negligible compared to the roadway. No traffic study would be required by the City of Newport Beach, and no traffic study would be required by City of Costa Mesa as well. In order to understand the conditions at this intersection and to make sure there weren't any issues we needed to be aware of, we did reach out to the County of Orange because it's their intersection. It's actually their jurisdiction over the signal. And we also reached out to the City of Costa Mesa. They did not report any concerns related to the intersection, and our traffic engineers are comfortable with this project. In terms of compatibility, this project is going to look different from the existing single-family development that's located in the City of Costa Mesa. However, there are scattered multifamily developments within the county area as well as the City of Costa Mesa. Further, this type of project is consistent with the development within the RMD zoned block, which goes from about Mesa Drive almost to Orchard Avenue along the Santa Ana Country Club border. Further, the Santa Ana Heights Specific Plan, which is adjacent to this site, actually allows for more dense development than the applicant is proposing and taller buildings as well. Additionally, the applicant is only proposing about 62% of the allowed density for the site. Lastly, the Santa Ana Cottages project, which was approved a couple years ago and is currently under construction, contains 3 stories and reaches the same maximum height as the proposed project, and is located directly adjacent to the site.
Mayor and members of the council, it's Jim Campbell, Deputy Director. I wanted to go over a little bit of the density questions. Recently, we had a code amendment to kind of change the meaning of this particular zone because there was an inadvertent error in the zoning code, and we took care of that last month. There were some comments that were raised there about the density of this particular zone, so I wanted to step you through that. The area was pre-zoned in 2004, and at that time we established a zoning density designator for the site that was reflective of the existing density on the ground. What we've discovered is that the density in this area, this RMD 1000, actually was higher than what the county's general plan afforded, and what we wanted to do was to avoid creating nonconformities. And so we created a more dense zone in this area at 43 dwelling units per acre. And the area was annexed in 2008, and we did some code changes, and we created one RMD zone for that entire area. That map that you see there is really a kind of an excerpt of the county zoning pattern, which allowed for 2 different density designations, the 1,000 square foot per dwelling unit and the 3,000 square foot per dwelling unit. What we ended up doing is creating one cohesive zone for the RM area, and that's just really north of Mesa Drive there along Santa Ana. The area southerly to that, we haven't annexed yet, and so that area is an area that we might consider annexing in the future. So again, I wanted to emphasize that the density that was reflected in the current general plan and these actions from 2004 and 7, it reflected the existing development and avoided creating nonconformities. And these
Can I just ask
density-
you a quick question?
Certainly.
Are our density standards more dense than the counties were in this specific area?
At the end of the day, it did make it more dense than the county's planning documents, but we did that purposefully to actually reflect the existing density on the ground. We didn't want to create non-conforming residential density.
So we were denser than the county.
Yes, we created it denser by design.
Or more dense. Okay.
And so, again, these density designations were created over a decade ago. The project does comply with the general plan and the zoning standards that we have in effect today. And so I want to kind of step you through the history of that because the question came up, and the history is a little bit interesting, but again, it was done by design. So with that, we'll move on to the conclusion of the, thank you, Liz. So what we would like you to do is conduct a public hearing tonight, and we do want you to find the project exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, Class 32 for infill development. This is for projects that are consistent with the general plan, consistent with all applicable standards. I'd like you to approve the major site development review. Again, this is the action that the Planning Commission took, and this is a de novo public hearing, so you're not bound by the Planning Commission's actions, but again, we do recommend that taking that action this evening, and Liz and I and Simone are here to answer any questions that you might have.
I have one question that Liz brought up the term, and I do hear this a lot in our planning documents and project planning, that the project the city requires high-quality materials. Do we ever specify anything more than that in our code requirements?
Madam
How
Mayor,
do we define high quality?
It's subjective. It is. And we do have a materials board for this project, so we brought it with us if you'd like to see that. And we usually typically pass that materials board to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commissioners have a chance to actually look at the materials board, the colors, the materials. It is subjective.
And the Planning Commission saw that board?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are there, Mr. Avery?
Actually, if I could just jump in just real quick, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Councilmember Duffield recused himself based on real property interests. He's a member of the Santa Ana Country Club, and that's why he left the room.
Okay. Mr. Avery?
Did planning anticipate builders to go down half a floor to achieve the number of floors?
I wouldn't say we anticipate it, but it's a common practice. Our height measurements are done from the existing grade, and so if you want to dig down and create retaining structures, it's typically done on a sloping property. We don't see it too often on a flat property, but it is consistent with the code. The overall height of the buildings will still be the 33 feet from the existing grade. So if they didn't dig down and they built it right at grade, the building would still be as tall as you see on the diagrams.
Right. So there's going to be a number, these are just going to increase in that zone, right?
That's correct. There will be
We're encouraging that,
that's
clearly,
correct.
with the density situation here, and I think that's a good thing. Obviously, we need, I assume this is, if not affordable housing, compared to the rest of the housing in Newport, it's going to be more reasonable.
Yes, it's not coastal property, so it'll be cheaper than coastal property.
Well,
correct.
yeah, and just the density side of it.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's all tied together.
Attached housing.
And as you go down that row and it all infills, how does it impact the neighbors that are on the property line to the east?
Okay, so the Santa Ana Heights specific plan borders this zone to the right on this map here, and it actually allows for denser development than what is proposed by this project and for higher buildings than this proposed project. It allows up to 35 feet.
So that there's a single family residential area behind some of this designated zoning area, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, what will happen with that eventually? It will all go multi-residential?
It's possible, but potentially unlikely just because the size of the lots that are there
Right.
likely won't be able to accommodate
Right.
anymore.
Right. So in the future, they can expect to have large, a wall behind them, basically, I would assume.
That's true, minus the setbacks. There's a
Right.
25-foot setback along
Right.
the back.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, I think it sounds great, so I'm just trying to think of the impacts. And I'm sure planning must have seen impacts like that. And also any impacts to building down. So what's that require, a pump system and all that to keep the water out?
That's correct, because you're depressing the structure downwards,
Right.
and it's basically creating a bathtub. You're going to have to pump all that water out when it rains. And the Planning Commission did have a lot of questions with regards to the height and depressing the structure down and trying to understand how we're measuring grade. You know, this project meets our zoning code, but it is 4 stories. 4 stories is allowed, and as long as it meets the height, and it does meet the height.
Right.
Because you're depressing it.
Yeah, and that was my interest, is just the unintended consequences of building in this fashion, which, you know, to most people, that's something you don't do, right? You don't create a bathtub and put your home in it, you know? So, thank you.
Ms. Brenner.
I need to disclose ex parte communication here because I did go visit with the applicants at their site, and nice young couple, almost 3 in their family now, and I had been supportive of Mayor Dixon pulling this for review. My concerns at the time were the congestion on the intersection and the visibility as far as people getting in and out and that sort of thing. What I came to find out through my visiting with the applicants was that the parking that is on Mesa Drive, where it is, you pull in currently, you have to back out onto Mesa Drive to get out of that. That will be eliminated, so that will be safer. And the one driveway that they're creating, the people will be able to pull in and turn around so that they will be coming out face forward onto Santa Ana Avenue, which will be also an improvement. And the other thing that I was very interested in was how they have set back everything from the corner. So it turns out the visibility on that corner is going to be best on their corner of all the 4 corners in that area. And I was actually pretty appalled at the fact that the other 3 corners have either built up to the very edge tall fences or tall shrubs, and you really can't see from any of the other 3 corners when you're making turns or coming out into that intersection. So once I was there and saw that this was actually an improvement to the safety of the area, then I was supportive of this project.
As long as you have this image up, I just want to ask a couple questions. While it is within the height limit, obviously 33 feet, this 4th story structure, I'm sure you said it's according to our code, but as you know, we will be discussing 3rd story structures in the next, is it this week or next week, in a community meeting. And so I would like to better understand, because this 4th floor structure is set, looks like it's properly set back, but it is 4 walls instead of open walls, 2 walls. I thought the code required 2 open walls.
In this particular case, it really doesn't. You can have fully enclosed space at this elevation. There isn't any additional step back in this particular zone. I think what you're referring to is how the single families in the duplexes in the R1, R2 zone have additional setbacks on the 3rd level, and that's what we're going to be discussing at the community meeting.
But not on RM.
But not on the RM.
Oh.
And so this additional step back that you're seeing here on that upper level, the applicant is doing that by design. They're actually going to be creating some outdoor living space up there for the residents' enjoyment. And I think that offset in the design actually helps the overall architecture and helps reduce the building mass on the adjacent properties. And we feel that's a good design for the area.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Avery.
Yeah, overall, I think the project's a good one, because I think this represents the future. This is what's going to be happening. We're going vertical, and this is a way to do it and stay within our guidelines and within our height limits. But yeah, it's unique. And it also is providing some serious, providing housing. That's great. Thank you.
Just to be clear, we do not, the city in our code does not have design guidelines, correct?
Our codes don't have very strong design guidelines. They basically look to make sure we don't have long unarticulated walls. We like varying roof planes, but they're very subjective standards.
Staff and the Planning Commission looked at this. We feel that this project does meet the limited guidelines that we have, but we don't have a formal design review process. This site development review application is what we have.
Okay. Let's turn it out to the public. Any public comments, please come forward.
Tim Stokes. As former chairman of the Santa Ana Heights Project Advisory Committee, one of the agreements in the annexation agreement is that any of those changes had to go back to the county to get approved. One thing I didn't hear tonight is that this project's gone back to the county because you did a change. And let me give you an example. When we built the fire station, we had the training center. The training center was too tall for the zoning there. It had to go back to the county for an approval. The reason why that was put in the annexation agreement is because the residents didn't really want to annex into Newport Beach because we didn't trust, the whole transparency issue from that perspective. So what we agreed to when we annexed into the city was that clause. You can't get rid of the horse trails, you can't get rid of the kennels, you can't get rid of the acre property, half-acre properties, 3-acre properties with this type of project. That was the reason we put that in the annexation agreement. So I didn't hear Mr. Campbell say that he went back to the county to get that approved. That's clearly in the annexation agreement with Santa Ana Heights. It was under policy K6, but the policy K6 got eliminated somehow, and we can't find that. So but it's still in the annexation agreement that any of these changes has to go back to the county to get approved.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, Mayor Dixon. What Mr. Stokes is referring to is a pre-annexation agreement that was done between the county and the city before we annexed the area. It's my understanding is that only really applies to the Santa Ana Heights specific area plan, which is a little bit, which was part of the same annexation. And I'm very familiar with that provision, and that we do have to go to the county if we want to change the specific plan. This particular RMD zoned area is actually not part of the specific plan. It was just some residual zoning on the periphery of it, and it's my understanding we don't need to go to the county to make any changes to the regulations here. Again, tonight we're not changing any regulations here. We're just looking at a project that would be consistent with those parameters.
Okay. Mr. Mosier, all right. Are you the applicant? No? Is the applicant here this evening? Would you mind just letting him speak for a moment, Mr. Mosier, and you can come back?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm the applicant for the project. I currently live at 1501 Mesa Drive, and prior to that, I lived at 20462 Santa Ana. And my original plans were just to do 4 units, but the project next door ended up getting approved, and my neighbor to the left of me wanted to sell me her property. So I had to start the process over again and go through, the planning commission.
Could you just identify your name?
Oh, my name is Anastasios Nicolau. Yeah. So I went back through the process of getting approved through the planning commission or through the city planners, and I just basically asked them, what can I build? What are the standards? And on top of that, I looked at the traffic and how all the neighbors basically built up tall hedges. One of my neighbors has like an unpermitted fence, and I'm planning on living at the property, so I set it back even further and tried providing more visibility to the area to vehicles and pedestrians coming into that intersection. With regards to the subterranean, we had to get a WQMP plan, so I have permeable pavers in the center of the driveway. So when it does rain, water seeps directly down into the concrete, and then there's like 3 backup systems. There's a sump up, and then there's an overflow, and it's the best way to kind of treat water, putting it back right into our ground. The top floor, the roof deck, the code doesn't really require any type of open space. I think it's limited, maybe I think 188 square feet, and I'm providing like 10 times that amount because I think outdoor living space is a key point to someone wanting to purchase a home in their family. So, as opposed to just having that whole floor additional living space, I set it back 15 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other so people could enjoy the outdoor space. There was an unfortunate accident in the area. There was someone that was leaving the Goat Hill Tavern, and they got arrested for a felony DUI, and I was the first person that kind of responded to the area. And there was a bad accident, and one of the main things that I wanted to do was just provide better visibility because of that happened. So I'm trying to build the best home that I can because I'm going to be living there. And also want to make it safe for the area. With regards to the building materials, I'm using the same interior designer that the Lido House villas were created by. So as opposed to using like a textured stucco, I'm going to have a smooth stucco, which costs a little bit more money but has a better overall look. Fiber cement sidings, in the front, stone, board and battens. So I'm trying to encompass a lot of the newer developed homes that are in the coastal area but further away from it. So I'm trying to use the best materials because, like I said, I'm going to be living there as well. I'm not just going to build a home, this project, and sell it off. But yeah. With regards to the amount of units, I could have installed more units, but I wanted to build a better quality project. So I originally scaled it back. I had from 13 to 9 to 8. So, it conforms to all of the homes down the Santa Ana corridor. Majority of those